6:30, I'll call the Development Review Board meeting, City of Essex Junction, Thursday, November 21st to order. Are there any additions or amendments to the agenda? Michael?
None for me.
Okay. Public to be heard is number 2. That's anybody who wants to speak on something not on the agenda tonight. Anybody? Anyone in the audience? Nobody. All right. Minutes for approval from September 19th. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
And a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion on the minutes. So my question was, it says I was present, and it says call to order absent a chair. So was I not chair at the time, or was I not actually present at the time?
Thank you for bringing this up. Happy to discuss. You were present, and I confirmed afterwards with Regina that though your chair status had lapsed, that continues until we elect a new chair and vice chair. So,
Okay, so I wasn't acting chair, I was actually still chair because we had to. All right, I just wanted to clarify.
I appreciate the clarification.
Does
Good
that
catch.
make sense now?
Fine.
All right. Did anybody else have comments or questions on the minute?
Never mind.
If nobody has any more comments, all in favor of the minutes as written with the correction that I think I was still chair. I don't know what that does to the minutes. What does that do to the minutes? Acting chair?
Yeah, I can make that correction.
Chair. Somebody, anyway, whatever. You figure it out. All in favor of approving the minutes with a minor change to the chair?
Aye.
Say
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. So, the second one is, I got all out of order somehow. Election of a chair and a vice chair. Oh, that's because that's the last one. That's one. All right, get rid of that. All right. So number 4 is election of chair and vice chair. So I think I need. I think I actually step away from the mic and Michael takes nominations.
Yeah, so we have a vacancy for chair for this board. Most of you have been on the board for a while, understand the process that this takes. You make sure that the meeting runs on time, call the meeting to order. John obviously is a great person to consult if you have questions over that. Anyone can put their name in if they're interested in chair or vice chair, and open to discussions and further comments.
I would love John to stay on as chair if he's interested.
Thank you. I will.
I would second that.
All right, so the board can make a motion to, I believe, elect a chair if they feel confident behind their decision.
Yeah, I move that we elect John Alden as chair.
Seconded. Seconded.
Great. Then
Any further discussion?
any further discussion or comments?
I'd like to say a couple things about item 4 when the time comes.
Item 4 refers to the election of a chair and vice chair for this board. Did you have a different?
No, the paper that I have says it's a public meeting for conceptual site plan review
Oh, that's the older version.
of triplex and parking on 162 West Street.
Sure. I believe you have a older unamended version of the agenda. The newest version is printed up here, and I'll make sure you get a copy of that. And I'll be sure that you have the floor to provide comment.
I have one.
All All right, I believe the board can vote on this appointment when ready.
So all in favor, say aye.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
All opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes 5-0.
All
So
right,
John
you're-
will continue
you're
as
off
chair.
You're off duty now because I'm chair.
Great.
So, thank you
You're
very
number
much,
2.
Michael. Yes, so we need nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Maggie for vice chair.
I second it. Anybody else want to nominate somebody for chair, for vice chair? Is there another nominee for vice chair? All right, all in favor of Maggie as vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We now have a chair and vice chair. Thank you all and welcome.
Thanks, John.
So now we are up to our first public hearing. Item 5, a variance application for a garage reconstruction built 3.5 feet from side property line at 37 Jackson Street in the R2 district by Hannah and Nicole Hansen owners.
So John, we should probably do the open meeting script.
Oh yeah, go ahead and.
I'll go ahead and read. The meeting of the Essex Junction Development Review Board will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically at 6 Lincoln Street in the Colvard Room at Brownell Library, where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. One member of this public body or other staff is present at Brownell Library to ensure the public can participate if desired. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this remotely, please alert us using the chat feature on Zoom or by emailing me at mgiguere, that's MGIGUERE at essexjunction.org. And in the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to Thursday, December 19th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. at 6 Lincoln Street in the Colvard Room at Brownell Library. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote of board members in accordance with the law. As required by the open meeting law, let's start the meeting by having the board members take roll call attendance participating in the meeting, and have those members, we have none attending remotely, to ensure that they can hear and be heard throughout the meeting.
And we don't need to do that because you're all.
You're all here in person, so we're good to go.
Awesome. Can I swear in everybody who wants to speak on anything on the agenda tonight, all at once? I'll say I do when I'm finished. I swear the testimony I'm about to give on the subject at hand is the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Thank you. Okay. So we're still on the public hearing, variance for the garage. Is there somebody here speaking on behalf of the garage?
Here.
All yours.
Sorry about that.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for considering this request. My spouse and I, Nicole Hansen, I'm Hannah Hansen. My spouse and I, Nicole Hansen, bought the property at 37 Jackson Street in 2021. At that time, the garage was in poor shape. It continues to be in poor shape and is structurally unsound. It really needs to be replaced. The roof is caving in, the walls are bowing. It really needs to be replaced. We have considered the best option for replacing this garage and have determined, for reasons I'll explain, that rebuilding it on the current footprint makes the most sense for the site plan, makes the most sense to maintain the character of the 1915 farmhouse and the surrounding neighborhood. We've had 4 different builders come and look at the property, all of whom agree that the current site is the appropriate site for the garage. We require a variance for this garage because it is currently sited 3 feet away from the side boundary line of the property. In this district, 8 feet is the ordinance, so we are requesting a variance from that 8-foot regulation to build it again at that 3 foot. The current garage is 12 feet 6 inches by 18 feet 9 inches. The new garage will be just under that at 12 feet by 18 feet. It will be taller at 16.5 feet instead of 10 feet, which it currently is. We plan to build a half-story above the garage for storage and some studio space above, which we think will, increase the value of the property and allow our usage of the property to expand as well. The reasons we need the variance are that the plot is very long and skinny, which I understand is also out of ordinance, which is cited in the staff report. There is not sufficient space to move the garage closer to the house and still be within that 8-foot setback. It still would be less than the 8 feet that we need. We've considered moving the garage around the back of the house. I know you have maps of all of this in your packets too. And we've had that priced out. It would cost over $300,000 to do that with the architectural nature of the roofs, and there's a balcony and a porch and all of that sort of thing. That's not going to make sense for us to do with the value of the house. The yard also has a reasonable slope going down in the back, which means that moving it a little bit farther away from the house and back would really be impractical with rain and snow coming down from the road down that driveway to get into the garage. So we've priced it out, we've looked it out. We really believe that this is the best option to maintain the character of the house, and it's cost prohibitive to do otherwise. In addition to all of this, there are many examples of other garages in similar sizes in the neighborhood, including our immediate neighbors on either side at number 35 and number 39. Each have garages at just about 3 feet from the side property line. I wonder if at some point that was the zoning requirement. The garage at number 35 is about the same size as our current garage. The garage at number 39 is even bigger than the garage we are proposing, and it's at a similar setback from our current garage and our current proposal. We believe this is the best option to replace the garage, maintain the property, maintain the character of the neighborhood, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just have one. The use of the upper level has just been described as a studio space. So it's not really a living quarters, like it's not an apartment,
We're not planning to put plumbing in it, and it's going to be quite small. So it's 12 by 18, but it's going to have an A-frame roof. It's going to be just about 6 feet tall in the center of that spine of that roof going over, which is enough to have, maybe a little desk in one end. We do plan to run electricity out there, but we don't plan to run plumbing out there. We have no intention of using it as an apartment. It's not big enough to be used for those purposes anyway. The house itself is just over 1,000 square feet. We think that adding a little bit up there will allow us to have a little bit more storage, just a little bit more wiggle room. Like I said, we do plan to insulate it and electrify it, but it's really not going to be adequate to live in.
And the only reason I ask is the neighbor appears to have a porch about opposite on the other side of the
Yeah.
fence. And the concern I had was all of a sudden, they had, instead of looking at a roof of a shorter building, they're now could be looked at from the
Right.
windows in there, so I'm just a little
I share that.
sensitive about that.
I appreciate that question, and we've thought that through. The design that we have has just a row of very narrow transom windows on that side of the garage, so that'll allow a little bit of natural light into the space.
Yeah.
But we don't want them looking into our stuff either. So we've added that into the design for privacy for both us and the neighbor next
And
door.
they could be figured glass or, frosted or something if it really got to be an issue. Okay. That's the only question I had. Any other board questions?
I guess I have a philosophical question of the reasoning behind the 8-foot side setback in the first place.
You'll have to ask the planning staff, but that's throughout the code now as the minimum setback in order to provide some kind of reasonable separation between structures.
I mean, it's difficult to tell the the reasoning behind why some pieces of land development code were put in place, but side setbacks are pretty common for various reasons, including the shade, I guess, shadow impacts, just to be able to preserve the ability to have windows. Yeah, I mean, I think side setbacks tend to be smaller than the front and rear, and there are, you certainly see a trend among different cities of reducing that, especially within the closer into the city center you get.
There are a lot of properties though in the junction will have to be, people will have to get a variance because they're grandfathered in, because there's a lot of them that are not currently 8 feet. They're
Many. I mean,
Many,
walking around the
yeah.
neighborhood, I've been noticing now.
So is there, it's again like a philosophical question, like
That is a great comment for the planning commission
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a presentation at the end of this meeting where
Yeah.
I'll go over some of the things that they're considering.
Yeah.
Side setbacks is not one of them, but setbacks in general are.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I just think that, with many of these cases, that there are so many properties where there are structures that sit either on the actual property line or not 8 feet
Yeah.
from the side.
Yeah,
setback.
we think about it often when it comes to existing nonconformities, whether it's setbacks or in other areas of the code. And especially for neighborhoods like the applicants that were built before zoning bylaws
Yeah.
were enacted. And so I think it is something to consider, and definitely to encourage the planning commission down the road if you feel like things need to be discussed
I
further.
do think it's important because uses of garages are changing, and so I think to John's point, I think discussing what the area above the garage will be, I think is important, because if it could affect a neighbor in a different way, because people are using their garages in different ways. So I think it is definitely something to mention and take into account.
I think it should say in the staff report already, but there is a clause in 802. Basically, there's something saying that non-conforming structures on properties with one single-family dwelling may be rebuilt as long as the new structure is not more non-conforming than the existing structure. The reason why this variance is needed is because it's slightly taller than before.
Yeah.
That may be the case. That wasn't my understanding from when we were looking at it together before. I thought the reason we needed a variance was because I have adequate lot space to build the garage elsewhere. I believe that lot space doesn't lend itself to actually being reasonable. That was my understanding of why we needed a variance, because we have the land, it's just not gonna work for us. I didn't think that the height was the reason, although
I don't
would be
think
happy
you
be
have to go
corrected.
too far down. My reading of
Yeah.
the material here was that you're entitled to rebuild on your foundation, you just can't make it bigger.
Right.
Now, the definition of bigger was where I got confused, because most of the time you're talking about a footprint, and they don't really think about whether it got taller. And I couldn't tell from the language whether that was a consideration or not. But if that's all we're here to discuss, is whether or not having it be a little taller is an issue,
I do.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I do want to clarify. Hannah's correct. The original reason this came before the board is that reconstructing an existing nonconformity. So that the height is a separate issue here, but this was originally flagged because our code prevents an existing nonconformity from being rebuilt if it is within the side setback.
Except
Well,
it says you can
except
under
here.
reconstruction. If that's coming from our code, I would argue that it's fine. It just can't get bigger. You can't make it closer to the line, and you can't make it footprint bigger, which would be increasing the nonconformity. So
We were also considering, just as a thought exercise, like if you could replace the building in the same footprint, but then go to the maximum height allowed in the zoning district. I mean, obviously that would be very different. But in this case, it is, a little bit taller, and that's why I think fundamentally that's the issue that being
So
considered here.
I guess the follow-up is it's not really a variance if they're actually entitled to do it. And yet the interpretation of what we're saying is that they're entitled to do it, but we're going to be extra careful and say we don't mind the extra height. And so from that point of view, I have no further questions of the applicant. I think the project is, looks reasonable and fine and all that. So anyone in the, we're still on the board. Anyone else on the board? More questions? Is there anyone from the audience that has a comment on this application? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Anyone ready to make a motion? Or,
I would move that we approve the variance.
so approving the variance means you're approving, if it's a variance, we gotta go through the 4 items. And they've laid them out in the activity here, in the staff report. So, does anybody have a comment on the standards of review for the variance, or can we just go right to the recommended motion? You made the motion. Actually, you just second before we can talk about it.
I second the motion.
All right, I'm trying to get my act together here. Okay, so the second motion. Any further discussion on the recommended motion as written? None. All right. All in favor of the recommended motion? I'll read it for the record. I move that the DRB approve the variance for a garage to be built 3 feet from the side property line at 37 Jackson Street in the R2 district. And I'll add on the existing foundations or within the existing foundations. That's a friendly amendment. I guess I have to formally get the motion maker to accept it.
I would accept your friendly amendment.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Very nice presentation.
Was.
Yeah.
Pictures are helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are now up to our second public, this is a public meeting. This is a conceptual site plan for review of construction of a triplex with parking at 162 West Street in the R2 district by Franklin South LLC owner. I see representatives of the project are here. For the record, please, Greg.
Yeah, I'm Greg Dixon with Krebs and Lansing Consulting Engineers.
Give Andy the owner.
All right, so we're in the conceptual phase. If you make it through this, we'll decide whether we're moving on to the next, right?
Perfect.
So, public meeting is open, and why don't you just give us a quick run through? We've all got the plans. We'll have questions for you, but
Yep.
quick overview.
Yeah, so Gabe and I worked pretty closely with staff as we were trying to develop this property. As you can see, it's a bit of a irregularly shaped lot. The intent is to try to take advantage of some of the new laws passed by the state to try to promote more condensed housing within city centers to provide sort of medium income housing as part of the overall housing market. So what we are trying to do here is propose a triplex on the property and kind of work with the property itself, but also kind of have some interesting design aspects to make it all work and make it function within the code. We have been doing this with kind of the also forethought of future regulation by the city and looking ahead at kind of having the ideas of triplexes and fourplexes being regulated more like duplexes. And so this is trying to kind of jump ahead of that regulation a little bit, but I believe it was also a helpful experience to staff to sort of highlight some of the issues that the regulation sort of makes for something of this size. basically stating if it was a duplex, I don't even think we'd be before you. It could be an administrative proposal. So I do think there's a lot of stuff in everything that we provided to the board, and there's a lot of material that staff has sort of worked to go over, and so I'd be happy to just sort of jump into questions and see what the board has to say.
All right. Anyone on the board have questions?
Just for clarification, the front setback that we're talking about, is that identical to the front setback of the adjacent property?
So yeah, we are requesting a waiver of the front setback, but that is just for like the overhang and the stoops going into the property. The actual building setback is still on the setback, which is 15 feet, and that is similar to the neighboring property. We didn't measure, I don't know if they have a front deck or porch or stoop or anything like that, but the corner of the building is close to 15 feet.
Anybody else on the board? Any more questions?
And aren't you requesting a height variance too? Like it's a bit
So
higher than
I do believe we could get under 35 feet. There was some probably lack of communication between me and the architect on that. I believe it's at 36 feet and 1 inches right now. But I've already had a conversation with Dan. We feel like we could lower the height of the roof line and either incorporate that into the top space and or just have a shallower roof line. So I put it on here mostly because we didn't have time to change all the architectural plans, but we are more than happy to forego that and meet the 35 feet.
Thank you.
Well, we're looking at it. I do want to point out that the other thing that we discussed is the front staircases will no longer exist. That was a sort of design thing that, again, I think got lost in translation, but how you will enter these buildings is actually through the ground floor, and then all the stairs and structure will be within the building itself. So the stairs that kind of have the word omit next to them at every location will be gone. And some of that sort of opening space on the second floor that was taking in that space, like the mudroom and the entrance, will just turn into livable space.
So when you walk into the garage.
You'd walk
essentially.
into, yeah, the garage.
Your own garage, which your car comes in the
Yep.
on the exit. Okay. And then the stairs are in there.
Yep.
up to the-
And there'll be like a maintenance room and probably some other storage.
Fire and safety, is this regulated as a multi-family house or an apartment, or do you have to hit 4 units before that triggers?
It's for sale, John. I'm trying to sell them as condominium. I did a similar building on Massey Avenue in Winooski 2 years ago, and exactly this design, and they were sold before they were even finished. And I was invited by the mayor and the community to go back and do some more of this design because it was very popular.
Yeah, I've just, my commercial background says if the only entrance / exit is through the garage,
It has two.
it has to, okay.
Yes, there's
Perfect.
one through the front door to the first facing the street,
Yeah,
and then there's one from the garage.
Okay.
So a double.
perfect. No more questions on that. I do have a number of questions. First of all, 7, I want to say a couple of things. One is, I was at the Vermont Development Conference last night, and the big push is housing, of course, being probably Vermont's biggest challenge right now. And so the effort to get as much housing onto this lot as you can is admirable. I then drove down the street this morning because I thought, well, the whole, like, a lot of times the streets have the gables to the street and not sideways to the street, but West Street, it's got to be, I think, probably 60% of the dwellings on West Street are actually facing this way, so I was
That's
wrong.
right.
this is gonna fit right in. There's another one right across the street from you,
Yes.
from that parcel that is set up the same way in almost an identical building. So, no problem there. I think it fits right into the neighborhood character and so on. You might want to do something to the treatment of that basement level just to spruce it up, you know. Let's see. There's a lot of variances, and I part of me says, well, you know, that kind of means you're trying to put a little too much on the site. But individually, I really didn't have a lot of issue with them. I like the pervious pavers. I think, you know, we should see more of those. They've been around for a long time with some proper maintenance. They actually work as pervious surface. So, you know, that's a nice, we don't see that very often, but I think I would support that. And whatever the staff interpretation was, I think they said it was okay. So I'm okay with that. The rear setback, like the site itself actually, because it's cleared out now, there's a, you know, you've done the demolition, so the site, you can see right through it now, and it appears relatively smaller than I thought it would. And there's a big tree line of, you know, major pines along the angled side. Do those get trimmed back or modified or adjusted at all, or are they okay the way they are?
I think we positioned the building where all those would be fine.
And the driveway, so one of the variances is related to how close the driveway is to the property line, which I think it's allowed to be 2 feet away from the property line, which is already inside the setback, but it's allowed, but you guys are going for 6 inches.
Mm.
And you don't have a real property survey. And so I'm a little nervous about that because you could lose that 6 inches or gain 2 feet. I don't know. So I think you're going to want to get a real survey before that
Yep, so
gets finalized.
Just to come for you, John, we found what, 3 pins?
we found 3 of the 4
Yeah,
pins out
we
there.
found 3 of the 4, so we feel very comfortable that we're gonna find the 4th one, but we're gonna do a survey.
Yeah, I think, you know, 6 inches away just feels a little
Yeah,
tight, for, you know, without knowing. I mean, as soon as you know, then you know. But
In
if
part-
that doesn't leave a lot of room for.
the condominium, as you know, John, I have to have it surveyed and certified to sell them as condos, so we
Yeah.
gotta do that anywhere.
Yeah, and we're only in concept right now, so you're fine, right? We're just telling
Oh,
you
yeah.
where we see the issues. So, the 36 feet 1 inch, I don't know. That's the height, right? So you already said you'd probably get it down to 35 feet. I mean, you can make it, you know, to lose a foot on a roof pitch like that, you just pitch it a little shallower and you'll be there. But
Yeah.
my question was more for staff on that one. Measuring building height is different in every community, and I'm just testing you guys right now. Are we measuring to the peak? Are we measuring to halfway between the peak and the rake? Are we what are we measuring the 35 feet to, and does that change whether he's over or not over the building height?
We can scour through the code, but I don't believe height is standardized as a measurement, as far as I'm aware.
It is, and as far as I understand it, it is the peak.
It's the peak. So on a pitched roof here. So just from a designer's point of view, I'll just remind you, and maybe you take this back to the planning commission, but that incentivizes flat roofs, because if I can't get my building program in with a pitched roof, but I can with a flat roof, I'm gonna come back in with a flat roof. So you might wanna take a look at that at the planning commission level, just because other communities measure roofs differently. And if that also provides a little flexibility for designers and in a tight housing market, that could be really helpful, right? Just Just a comment there, I'll assume that we're gonna hit 35 feet under the current proposal. Unless you come back and tell us otherwise. The missing a light fixture, missing the lighting plan, no problem at conceptual. That's the big problem for me on final.
So I did want to discuss that
Yeah.
aspect with the board. As Gabe said, these will be privately owned units. And a little bit of a worry of mine is that there probably won't be an entity that kind of controls lighting on the site.
No, but we will.
And
So
well,
that's where this
that's my
comes
worry.
in.
We can create a lighting plan. Creating
Yeah.
a lighting plan is obviously not a hard thing to get above, but I just didn't want to lock the people who eventually buy these units into this lighting fixture needs to stay on there for X, or do they have to come back to the board?
It's one of my
to change
pet
the lighting?
peeves, and I'll tell you why. Because every once in a while I drive down the street and I can't tell if it's a car coming at me or somebody's floodlight over their garage. And those do not meet code, but everybody has them, or many people have them. And it's sometimes dangerous, but always obnoxious. And so we are going to control that. And I don't, whatever people want to put up on their house, if it's not code compliant, I would expect the city at some point to have a enforcement arm that would say, hey, you can't have that.
So on that line, I do have a note on the plan saying that all light on site must be downcasted and not broadcasted off site. And so I didn't know, I'm trying to sort of make it open for stuff like that aspect to be easily a way to somebody to say, no, you can't do that, but we're not going to tell you you can't put up a different fixture.
So this is going to be
light.
condominiumized.
Yes,
Does that automatically bring with it some kind of HOA or rules or that kind of thing?
Yes.
Typically, we've asked for copies of those regulations,
yes.
and they'll probably need to include stuff like you can't put up lighting that's not compliant with the city code, right? So,
Yeah.
so we'll be looking for that too. You go from single-family home to something that is regulated like a commercial property, you get all this stuff.
Yeah, and that's where I was just trying to gauge what the board thought about.
We had a little bit of an issue with that at the development that was over by the pool, or the lights that came up the first time, they were,
Let's talk about that.
and,
You wanna
and,
talk about that?
sure.
Okay. At the time was COVID, and those poles we put in, they were not available. So I
Oh, the
had-
little bollards
the
there.
blue bullet,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I had my engineer clear it with the city engineer for the equal wattage, same fixture except different name. And after we put them in, a couple of neighbors called and complained. So Regina said, "You need to change them." I said, "But we already have an approval to put them in." She said, "No, that's not what your blueprint says. You need to change them." So we have to change all 15 lights, and I'm still sitting in my garage here, almost $15,000 worth. And we put the new ones in.
Are they missing a shield or something? I mean, if they're the same thing, they should be able to stay down shielded or.
They are down shield, but I can't explain what neighbors would do sometimes. So I changed them anyway to please. And then she came in and she said, "Oh no, they're still bright." I says, "Look at the specs of the blueprint. This is exactly the same light." Oh, this. So you know what she made me do? I just thought you wanted to guess.
I do because we don't always hear the song.
Yeah,
We
no.
approve them, and then there's a whole
Yeah.
nother wing that does that.
So we had to take a black tape and tape half the light on each one to cut them down in half on lighting. So that's what we had to do to finally get CO to go ahead and rent them. It was.
That's an unfortunate chain of events there, but
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, the ultimate thing is, it is a sensitive topic. We thank you for your compliance. We need to make sure that we have to approve something that's compliant, and
Absolutely.
after that, it's, yeah, but the lighting, especially that low light, if it's really shining kind of out and not down, you know, it can be kind of distracting to drivers mostly, and it's not usually an issue for the pedestrians or maybe the people that live there if it's shining in their window. But I did drive by those lights after the complaint was made from
Yeah.
Maple Street, and
Mhm.
you know, yeah, you could see they were too.
More
I think I
dense
saw
down.
the first version, not the second version.
Yeah.
So anyway, you got caught in the.
I got caught in the middle, but I corrected it. I wasn't gonna make anybody upset.
Very, very nicely done. So that's the lighting. I want to see a lighting plan. It is one of those things that people can really take offense to. You have to make sure it's done properly, and then, you know, if you can point back to the requirements and the engineering and the installation, nobody's gonna make you replace them again.
And to kind of connect the two that we've heard thus far, you know, I think it's really important that we get compliant designs that we approve so that unsuspecting HOAs don't move in and find that, oh, it turns out that our lighting was non-compliant. Now we need a variance to do the thing that we had already done.
Yeah, they can't get those. I mean, they don't meet the criteria for getting a variance. Like, you can't self-inflict the need to have a variance. You know, you can have a grandfathered case where you get to do something, but it's pretty hard to get a variance for something that you did for a reason that amounts to I didn't know. Yeah. Right.
So, Chair, I just got an update about the building height. Thank you for bringing up the average versus peak issue. I actually was not aware of this, but I'm looking at the definition right now, and the if it is not a flat roof, if it is a pitch roof, you take the mean of the highest point and the eave, and use that as the
So you're fine.
as a height. So yeah, they're actually within
Yeah.
the height
There
limits.
you go. Nice. And so if the planning commission needs to do any more adjusting, or there's not clarity, that they can look at that, but that sounds consistent with what I've seen in other communities.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. So we don't have to worry about that piece of it now. Let's talk about the curb cut, which, according to this, is supposed to be when it's reviewed as a commercial property, it's supposed to be 24 to 30 feet, which seems excessive for a project like this, in my opinion. Although I want to talk about the 12, because 12, what's your average car, like 5 to 6 feet wide? So,
Average car,
yeah,
6.5.
I'm not talking about
Although not
the
the
big
width.
truck. I don't know. You know, like, the point is, can you get cars going by each other on the paved surface?
No.
And how wide does it have to be? Does it have to be 14 feet? I mean, it doesn't have to be 24. That's giving you like 4 feet in a car and 8 feet in a car and 4 feet, right? So I don't need that much, but we're in concept now. I think it would be helpful if we knew what the minimum distance was before you could have two-way traffic in a slow, very controlled environment like this, right? And maybe not for the whole driveway, but at least maybe, I don't know, you figure out. That's part of what you're trying to help us out with. I don't know that I have a problem with 12 feet and it's one way. But if you went to 14 feet and it was passably two-way, you know, I would support that.
I think to continue on that conversation, it may make sense to swell it close to the actual entrance, because then you could technically say if someone's sitting there waiting to egress out, another person could egress in at the same time.
Yeah,
But
and
I don't
that's
know
the
if-
widest part of your site right there, so that
Yeah.
might be a good compromise. Maybe.
Yeah, and so I think we wouldn't be opposed to that. I picked 12 feet because I thought it was sort of a compromise between, it probably could go as thin as 10, and then we would probably not be asking for that other 6-inch variance.
I'm just
at
saying, in
that
my,
point.
my neighborhood is all single-family homes, and the average driveway width is 20 feet, because they're all two-car garages, and so you need kind of a 2 lanes. It's just saying. So it's not overly large for a residential property to see something, 20 feet or near that. But it's, since it came up on the thing here, I think 24 to 30 is too big, for this type of property. But I would still encourage some way to have a little passing.
Yeah, maybe if we made
maybe
the
right there at the throat,
maybe if we made the first 15 feet, 15 feet.
enough so a car can be sitting. I think that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Anybody else on the driveway width curb cut issue?
Having lived in similar properties that only had room for 1 car, but had 10 adults living in the property, we would back out onto the street, which you can't really do on West Street. Like, West Street's probably going to be too busy
Just
for...
busy enough, yeah.
Yeah. So my feeling is that widening it at the outset, and then the people who buy these are going to know to be careful that someone's not coming out. If they are coming out, then pull over at the outset there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we could make that work with coverage and stuff like that. So I don't think
You are tight on the coverage, but
we are.
maybe you have a little. Was there a sliver of? You've only got a certain amount of pervious pavement going there. You might be able to keep expanding that.
Yeah, that's sort of how we.
I mean, to have the back edge of that be regular pavement and then pervious is, you're wrapping it. You may just say it's all pervious back there.
I was trying to kind of, pervious pavers don't do the best.
Do they need an edge?
On turning and the edge, and so that's what we were trying to kind of encapsulate it between a pavement and the house, which I still think we could do, even if I think I could make the numbers work.
All right. So I might need some staff help on this, but the variance for the driveway, 6 inches from the side property line, when the requirement is clear at 2 feet. Is that something we can actually give a variance on?
There's no provision for a waiver in the code. As far as I'm aware, our variance system is written such that it provides relief from anything in chapters 6 or 7. But I can have Chris chime in if I'm misunderstanding that.
That is correct. Variances can be applied for anything in chapters 6 and 7, but it has to meet the narrow criteria for qualifying for a variance.
Yeah, and this is kind of an odd-shaped lot. Would be the only thing I could see would allow it into the variance category. All right, but again, we already talked about, I'm nervous about the 6 inches being, without the survey, I don't know how that plays out yet. Anybody else on the 6 inch from the property line item?
Don't love it.
Tree roots, I mean, all those trees along that whole fence, you got, I'm not an engineer, but you're gonna want sub-base and base and all that, and
Yeah, I think
you guys
they're
worried about that, or?
right where it is closest. They're just 2 smaller pines, so my hope is that we don't really dig into those too much.
And the pines are on which side of the property line?
I believe all the trees are actually on the neighboring property.
I'm not sure where I go with that. You probably have some obligation to protect the trees. And so, I don't know, maybe, would you put pervious? I mean, you put a paved driveway over the root structure, aren't you? Isn't that bad? Do you wanna put the pervious pavers over there too, so they can still get water, or?
I mean, I guess we would be open to that. The trees still have the other 180 plus sort of area to collect water.
And I would be nervous, but, I'm not sure what, this is probably why there's some setback requirements, like 8 feet that appear to allow down to 2, but, 18-inch strip difference, I don't know, I don't know how we sort that one out yet, so we're gonna, as concept level, we're gonna put that on the, we're worried about it list.
Mhm. And I think I discussed this with staff too. I think there could be an opportunity, again, as we sort of bump and weave this entrance, making it larger at the street. We could tighten it up at that location. One, that would also kind of limit the ability for accidents sort of thing, because you sort of have, if it's a choke point, people got to go extra slow in that area. So it's still 12 feet wide in that area.
Yeah.
We could look at making it 10 for that one section, and we'd be 2.5 feet from the property line. I mentioned that to staff, that I could just do that, and they thought it made sense to come to the board and have the discussion before I changed it up, but it's something that we could just do right now if the board is just thinking that's a step too far. And if that is, then we can make adjustments. But I mean, the request for the variance is obviously you're seeing the size of the building, and you're seeing that it's sort of just fitting in to the property itself to begin with kind of just a small area to get out and around back.
It's not, I mean, the building to the overall property size, I don't think is really that bad. But with the driveway, paved, pervious area back there, it's a fair amount of coverage, so,
Mhm.
yeah. All right, there was a question on the landscaping. I do want to see the landscaping plan. You don't have one. That's something that I think is statutorily required, so we're going to need to see that.
So we do have landscaping on the plan, so maybe it just needs to be by a landscape architect.
I've argued about this one. I think the scale of a project should be taken into consideration. My personal opinion. The staff is gonna have to say whether or not it has to be provided. I think they wrote that into the LDC that if it's a commercial project, it has to be a registered landscape architect.
That is something that the planning commission is thinking about at this moment. But the timing of this project is such that the existing rules still apply, and this requires landscape architecture review.
Like, I'm not a
Standard.
registered landscape architect, but I've done them and I know how to put the Latin in and all that, and still they won't let me do it.
I like the garden, so we picked out some good plants. I'm not a landscape architect, so we'll take that into consideration.
Okay. Let's see, there was a question on the sidewalk being replaced. It's all asphalt all up and down that particular area now, and the LDC called for concrete, and the proposal is showing asphalt, and it's thrown into our lap to decide, and I don't think that's fair. I think the city has to take a stand on the planning side on whether or not, I mean, for example, Williston didn't have any bike paths, and they said every project that does every project that's developed has to put in a bike path. We don't care if it goes nowhere. We're putting in bike paths, and ultimately they get a connected set of bike paths. So, in a similar way, I think if the city wants concrete, you gotta ask everybody who does a project to put in concrete. And if you don't really care, then you can allow asphalt, but I don't think we should decide that. Like, I would be fine matching the existing pavement, because if somebody's gonna come do, let's say the city says, we're gonna replace all the sidewalks in along West Street, and you decide you're gonna do it in concrete, they're all gonna go and become concrete. But right now, we're not there, and there isn't anybody with concrete, so we either say, doesn't matter, first one in, rule says concrete, we want concrete, or I'm gonna let them put in asphalt.
So I would note that in 2023, the city did some, basically replaced the asphalt on that.
They just replaced it
sidewalk.
with asphalt?
Well, it was always asphalt.
Yeah, but
There was
did
not
a
enough
new
money.
sidewalk with
Right.
asphalt.
That's right.
Okay. I have no further questions.
And that was in 2023.
2023, it's a pretty new asphalt.
I mean,
They put the
sort of
the
like.
water line in, I believe.
Yeah.
It was also because it was in bad shape at the time, but there was not enough money to make it all concrete.
Again, I don't know if this project is opposed either way. I think my sort of reading of it was it didn't make a ton of sense to put in concrete, one section of
That's the
concrete.
way I'm looking at it, like, you know, it's gonna make this project
And then
different from everything around, then it's only a year old.
the only caveat to if the concrete is required by the board is just, are you gonna require us to replace the entire section of between the property lines or just the areas that we are planning on disturbing?
Yeah. Let me ask another question, maybe you know the answer. It appears that the new, city standard for width is 5 feet, which I would endorse, cause my neighborhood's sidewalks are 3.5 or 4, and they get shredded, the grass on each side of the sidewalk gets shredded every winter because the plows are 5 feet wide. So, sidewalk plows. So I think it has to at least be 5 feet wide, but after that, I'm fine with asphalt. Is that an issue for anybody?
I think we're even calling 5.5 because it's 5.5 right now.
Okay.
out there.
Fine. So you're basically
We're gonna match existing.
gonna replace what's, yeah, that's fine.
Make it nice for bike riding or kids.
Right on the road. Oh,
Kids riding their bike. Walking.
All right, so
Should I
that
get back
takes
on
care of that one. I'm finished.
No,
Yeah.
Captain Impossible.
I guess
Can we get into colors? I just want to say, you're not required to give a whole lot of building descriptions in this zone, right? I don't have really design control other than I think there was some minor little, it needs to sort of match the character of the neighborhood thing. Other than that, I can't say anything.
If you have suggestions, John, just tell me.
I just want to say I'm glad you included the elevations of the structure, so I had some idea of what was supposed to show up. So thanks for that.
We'll make it nice. I
I-
promise. 'Cause I have to sell them. I'm not gonna sit on them.
No metal, no corrugated metal siding on this.
No, you know, everybody tells me, compliment me on the hotel. You don't like that?
It's not my favorite.
Really? Yeah, I get a lot of compliments.
It's it does look better than it did when it was under construction. Now that it's finished, it looks better.
Landscaping.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You need some landscaping.
Yes, I know, but we ran out of time. When I went to get landscaping, there was no landscaping left.
Okay.
So it's coming.
So
is
it's
what
coming.
You mean.
Oh, yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
Okay. All right. I am finished. I would like other board members to have a second crack at all of this. Anybody with stuff to add or other opinions?
I guess one thing we haven't brought up yet is I don't know if it's a waiver or the variance for the side yard setback for on the sheet of paper, the left
The
hand
left
side.
yeah.
To kind of add some context to that, we are meeting 8 feet. There's 8.5 feet there, but because this is now considered right now in the current regulations, it's a multifamily home, and therefore, because it's a multifamily home, you need to meet a 15-foot
I
side.
thought that was the
That's the
buffer
buffer.
language,
That's
right?
that's a buffer. That's right.
So is there a setback, that's sort of a conflict there, because if the setback didn't change and it's allowed to be 8 feet, because side setback, I mean, that goes with the property, not the use, right? Until you get a use that's now, I mean, it's still residential, but because of the number of units, it kicks it up. I would still argue that it's residential next to residential. It's sort of a low-scale residential next to residential, but it is technically multifamily next to single-family. The buffer may apply, so it's something that's supposed to keep the big, not quite the same commercial development from overshadowing the neighboring smaller single family residential use. And in this case, the building next door is bigger than this one. So that, it's, I'd look for some direction on how we are to apply this. There's common sense, and then there's on paper, and then there's buffer.
This is one of the things that we are having to bring back to the planning commission, because we did not notice this until it became an issue.
Yeah.
But it's strange that a building of this at the same footprint with the same height, exact same building, if it was a single family home, it would be allowed 8 feet from the from the side property line, whereas if there were 3 units in there, it's suddenly not allowed. It's very strange. I don't think that was intended, but that is how the LDC is currently written. One of the reasons behind that is the definition of multifamily. The intention was probably for multifamily to mean bigger things.
Because it could mean 30 units.
That's right.
Yeah. How about this? How about it's a duplex that the state says can be a triplex? In which case, maybe we're halfway here, halfway there.
Well, there's the way I thought of this is that it could be considered as a variance as well, and this is all related to the odd-shaped lot as to why that corner has to be as close to like within 15 feet of the side lot line.
All right. I'm tempted to say that if anything, we might want to see some additional landscaping there as a buffer. And in other projects, it's not so much the building that needs the buffer, it could be the parking that needs the buffer. So maybe somewhere down that side, buffering is increased, although the setback is allowed to remain based on a balance of scale, proportion, and language in the code.
So are we thinking like a fence or like?
Is there a fence there now? Is there a fence?
There's kind of I believe it's kind of a wire fence
There
right
seemed to
now.
be
So-
a fairly clear delineation, but that building on the neighboring site is a long building, kind of runs all the way down the property.
And I think we even proposed putting a fence kind of along the property line, but I just wanted to bring that up because
Did you guys talk to the neighbors at all? Is this a?
we have not.
Wait, so we'll get to him in just a second here. Yeah.
I do have an emailed comment from the property owner at 164 across the wooden picket fence that we're referring to here
Thank you.
as well.
That's on the right side from the street.
The right
Correct,
side.
yeah. It's the side that is closest to the driveway,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
where the concern with the 15-foot buffer rule would come into effect.
And then on the other side, it looks like you're proposing to replace that fence with something, and you'll discuss that with the neighbor.
Yeah, so the fence that's on the right side of the plan is I believe it's like
It's a wooden-
wooden
yeah, it says
sort
wood.
of fence,
Yeah.
and that's on the neighboring property. We'd be happy to have a conversation with that property owner, but I want to avoid a not fence right next to a fence situation. But the fence in between the property on the left side could use some sprucing up.
And that you've heard from the neighbor on the right.
Yeah, if the board is ready for that discussion, I'm happy to bring that.
Let's hear from, if the board is ready to allow public comment, I would like to hear from the gentleman in attendance.
Did you touch the rear setback waiver? For the rear yard setback?
I don't think we had a rear.
It's only,
Isn't that the part of the driveway is within the rear setback?
Yeah, that's, I don't see a way of, like that, the way the LDC is written, you can't have, a driveway that goes into the rear setback. I mean, I
But
can't
you
tell you
can
if
in
that
the
makes.
There are
on the side.
provisions.
The side, you can go within 2, but it says specifically that does not apply to the rear setback.
so we really, is the rear setback, this is 25 feet. So the whole.
Well, the rear setback is 15 feet. The 25 feet would be,
25 feet
Building
for,
setback and a deck setback?
yeah, sorry, in a former iteration of this plan, the building was at a different location, so that 25-foot setback, I could probably just take off the plan, because that was for the deck.
But the driveway is within the setback.
The driveway is, I didn't know that was an issue. I'm sure I could, right now I was using that as kind of like a little bit more of a turning around situation for that last unit. But they'd probably have plenty of room to move that, or I could find another location for it.
I think we'll have time to work on that with staff, because I think there's some code interpretations to sort out. All right, I'm gonna invite the gentleman in the audience to come up and introduce himself, and
Yes.
it's
My
your
name
turn.
is-
It's your turn now.
My name is Gary Sevick. I've lived at 160 West Drake for 34 years and a month. I've seen a lot of changes. The house at 162 was in disrepair when Gabe Handy bought it. I've had to put up with 4 years of tenants from hell. Mr. Handy could attest to the fact that he hasn't been exactly happy with the tenants either. But to address this building plan, I would like to know where you're going to put the snow. And I'd also like to know where, if there's any plan for handicap accessible to that building. It doesn't look like with those stairs that it's gonna be easy for anybody once they reach maturity, if I could use that word, to climb those stairs. Looking at the site plan, there's no way in hell a truck's gonna get through there, and if it did, where would they put the snow? The last tenant that was there piled the snow up and over the fence on the south side of this property. I don't know where the person who owns 164 feels on this, how they're gonna deal with the traffic, how they're gonna deal with plowing the snow. I apologize, I have brain cancer and there's a lot of things going on in my head right now. But I've had experiences with Mr. Handy. And I've seen some of the reports on the television station about his property in Burlington. That is a fuel tank, a 275-gallon fuel tank that was in the basement of 162 West Street. On October 2nd, when I took that picture, I had a conversation with Mr. Handy. He asked me what I was taking a picture of. The person who excavated the holes set this tank from the basement of 162, 6 feet from the property line, 22 feet from my bedroom window. On September 28th, I believe, Sunday, I woke up and I could not breathe. I called the Essex police. They said that it was private property and there wasn't anything they could do. The hole where the buildings were had not been roped off at all. Later that day, a police person checked the site and he couldn't see anything wrong with it. Later, the volunteer firemen put up a plastic tape to try to keep people away. Now, my point is, with that picture, that Mr. Handy may have all the greatest intents in the world, but I've seen some other things that's happened. I had a sign in my front yard on my property that said, Handy property. It was a backside of a vinyl siding, 2 feet long, 8 inches high. It stayed there for one day. I came out the next day, the sign was down. The stick was there, but there were no screws in it. And this was stuck in the dirt, in the grass, with about this much exposed. I have all the respects in the world for Mr. Handy, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life in that house, which is what I planned, living next to somebody that I believe dumped fuel oil in order to empty that tank. If you consider the squeezing of this property together, I really think that ought to be reconsidered. I can't imagine anybody over 30 climbing up them stairs. I can imagine somebody trying to push a plow truck around that building just to clear the driveway. I've lived on West Street. The traffic is a bitch. It's nothing but a constant stream of cars during the commuter hours. They don't stop for nothing. There's also a piece of the pavement that's in front of 162 that is missing. The person who ran the excavator, the tracks on the excavator were metal. They dug up the pavement. I don't know what to say. I'm trying to be respectful of Mr. Handy and what he's trying to do. But knowing what I do, there ain't no way in hell you're gonna be able to push a plow truck around that. And there really isn't enough room to pile up any amount of snow for the amount of exposed hard surface that's there. The water is gonna drain on property adjacent to it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there's some reasonable questions in there and concerns. Anyone else? Did we have somebody online? Anybody else want to speak as a public comment?
No one's online from the public.
No one's online. Okay. Would you like to read is that the other side neighbor that's?
That's correct. I can read it verbatim. Mike, thank you for, this is from Mike Domingue, who lives at 164 West Street. Mike, thank you for returning my call, and I apologize that I cannot attend the hearing. To summarize our conversation, As I view the drawing on page 4 of the conceptual and final site plan, the requested waiver of a 6-inch distance from the edge of the proposed 162 driveway to my property gives me cause for concern. My concern is the potential repetitive damage that could be caused when snow plowing to approximately 16 feet of my split rail fencing and 10 feet of the stockade fencing. My question of the developer, engineers, and planners of the proposal is twofold. Has this been considered, and what proactive steps have been taken, if any, to prevent any damage from occurring? If damage has occurred, who will be the responsible party for resolution, and what are the terms and conditions and process? I also noted in my conversation with Mike that with the 15-foot buffer requirement that we talked about earlier, the board does have the ability to ask the applicant to provide a up to 6-foot opaque fence between properties. So that's the summary of our conversation.
Okay.
I guess my other question was, in addition to plowing, garbage for the 3 units, do they, each person have to provide, like how, do they have to have any garbage?
They use the tote.
So each person brings it out to the curb?
Yes, they roll
Okay,
them out
you don't
and
need to have any sort of,
There's no,
no
central.
central,
they're in the
okay.
garage.
You don't need to have that, okay.
And shall I respond to the other stuff or just keep? No, I'll stay quiet.
I don't. The demolition activity is over and done with. There's a process for that. There should be consequences if it was done improperly. I don't think that's our thing. The snow storage is our thing. The damage and setbacks to adjacent property is our thing. And so we'll be concerned with that. I hate redesigning anybody's projects, but I'm just thinking if the whole block of buildings were rotated 90 degrees, does that do something different for you guys in terms of all the site layout? And
I think he tried it.
do you? It sounds like you tried it already.
Didn't
So
work.
Well, it didn't work one, and then you wouldn't have that sort of street presence at all anymore. So
right, you'd be kind of looking at the
side
end
the
of.
building.
So there's that whole apartment complex by the. It's across from Dave Whitcomb's Automotive, which is something different now. I forget what it is, right? They're up against the banking as it goes up toward the school. And they got the cemetery kind of facing them, and you drive in, and all the units are right sideways, essentially to the street. So I'm not sure if you do it right. I'm not sure that's a problem, but like I said, I'm not. We got an application in front of us. This is what we're looking at.
I think that project also, isn't that technically a private road? So I think that's how they sort of.
Those are sort of semantics, you know, like we're worried about how the building addresses the street, and I think you make a good point, and that's why I had to drive down the street, because I wanted to understand the same thing, you know, what is the character of the other structures along the street, and I think you're right on with this. I did come up, if we can look at the elevations again, I just wanted to point one thing out. I did have, my only comment was that the elements that have the windows in them and the roof peaks, if those were a little stronger, it would reinforce the image that you're looking for. I think, you know, just give them some pop, or they're a little taller or a little wider or something. If you were really trying to give it the sense that it's a, you know, it's 3 units that are defined by the roof pieces, you know, those could be a little bigger, and it wouldn't be a bad thing.
I think that's where I discussed that Dan and I sort of missed the mark on what I was sort of describing. But I think our intent is to sort of have like 3 entrances, then a stoop, and then have an overhang to kind of make it look a little bit more.
The roof, that, I mean, because the we all know the snow and the rain follows the valley and drips, right? So wherever you end up with that, the gable itself is the best way to keep snow and rain off the stuff below. So it would help on the backside too, not to be dumping all the water onto the porch, but if you made that thing twice as big, it would act as a rain diverter, essentially a big one, right? So front and back, that's my only comment. I'll leave it there. It's your project. I don't actually have, we don't have purview over that as far as I know. It already essentially fits the character of the neighborhood as is, but you know, we're always trying to make improvements if we can. All right, anyone else with questions or other topics?
What about the snow? I mean, I think that's a great question. Like, what was your plan?
There's plenty of room in the backyard. If you go there, there's plenty of room to push the snow, but if over the,
And so the cars would have to be in the garage.
yes, over the,
Yep, so I think there's probably room here for snow collection, here for snow collection, and out here for snow collection. Obviously, we wouldn't be pushing it right there. I think also hearing some of the feedback from the neighbors, again, we could tighten this to 10 feet, maybe even add a curb, which would keep the snowplow from kind of digging up or getting closer to your property line, so you have your 2 feet. Because I think we'd have room with taking 2 feet out, so that's 6 inches. I could add a 6-inch curb. So you'd have 10-foot road, the 6-inch curb that kind of just went from here to there to kind of further protect that closed spot. And then all the snow would be back here in the areas that are sort of covered.
And these are 2-car garages, is that right?
I'm sorry, the
They're 2-car garages or one?
One car? Two car?
They are 2-car garages, but it'd be kind of stacked.
Yeah.
And the requirement is only 1 car each, so I guess it would be on the property owner to make a determination on how to do it.
depends on the size of the car they buy today. Those
Yeah.
mini cars, you can get 2. If you get a mid-sized car, you're gonna get 1. And the rest
Yeah.
is used for storage.
I guess the reason I'm asking is, you know, to your point, Maggie, about where the plow would be able to deposit
Yeah.
snow. You could see the HOA requiring cars to be parked in the garage when there's snow. That becomes a little bit more challenging if they then have to go find
Yeah.
street parking. I'm not sure what's available. And then you could see where that might lead the plow person to put the snow somewhere that's less.
We're also assuming
Ideal.
that they'll even decide to hire a plowing company. So
Sure.
I mean, it's still a smaller sort of unit size where they could just collaborate on shoveling. Not everybody plows. So.
The last tenant set up in the property, how many?
They're gonna be an association and they,
No, sorry, before the demolition happened,
It was a single family home.
it was single family and there
It was
were
single
issues
family
with
home.
snow then?
Well, so I forget your name, but the driveway was closer to his property. So the existing driveway is right along the wire fence that we were just talking about. So the plowing of snow or shoveling of snow, because the driveway was so close to the property line, was a lot closer in the old stuff.
Yeah, so the curb idea is interesting. It doesn't help the trees out that much unless it's just a rolled curb on the edge of the asphalt. And it doesn't go, you know, like you see a 6-inch curb that went down 18 inches or something. So that would possibly be a problem for the roots again.
I think it would be in combination with meeting the 2 foot. So
Yeah.
if we have a 10-foot wide
Yeah.
road with a 6-inch curb, we're 2 feet away from the property line. We're no longer talking about needing the variance.
And can we require a fence on both sides to help out the neighbors?
I think
As-
you can under the buffering requirement.
It's under Chapter 7 as a
Yeah.
part of that 15-foot buffer
Yeah.
rule. So I can do some more digging to see if it would be required for both sides.
Yeah, just for make it more amenable to the neighbors.
Well,
as
I am sensitive to the notion that, you know, that if I was plowing this thing, I think that fence would be obliterated at the corner.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I mean, I'm just being sensitive to how the plowing operation works, you know, it depends how that's done and what equipment, I mean, it may be somebody's snow blowing it, I don't know, but I think that's a reasonable concern.
I think it may be a little more straightforward if Gabe had if this development puts up the fence so that the fence, if it is damaged, is
it's their
theirs to
fence.
fix.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're opposed to it, I just thought
It
having
did.
two fences next to each other was kind of odd.
Yeah.
Right, it might make
It
sense
is,
to just
and,
talk to them.
and, you know, again, it's
Well-
maybe the discussion with the neighbor, I mean, if he's got a stockade fence that switches to split rail,
Yeah.
you know, the split rail isn't gonna stop the snow,
Yeah.
but somebody hits it, it's gone, right? You know, plows are inherently dangerous to fences.
Seems like
Um,
the split rail is more closer to the problem area, and I don't know where the stockade fence begins. So-
It's about halfway back
Oh,
through the curve.
Yeah.
But it is a legitimate concern. So I think I have enough for the conceptual portion of tonight. Does anybody else have additional material for the applicant?
Is there something that could be done at the landscaping stage about drainage of the snow melt so that it's not, so that it doesn't pile on this property, but then all the water when it melts runs onto Mr. Sevchik's property?
I mean, from the area, this area is very sandy. It's great soils. I think we could provide some sort of shallow retention areas for not only snow to be piled, but also rain to kind of be directed to, and just allow it to infiltrate. We were gonna plan to do that anyways. That's just good practice to try to keep water on your property. I do think that the added aspect of that being pervious pavement, you'll see a lot of water kind of just going into that in general. And so I think that will help the situation too, but we can definitely add some sort of pockets where snow can be piled and then as it melts, it sort of just stays there. I don't expect water to pond out here, just the soils are 20 feet of beautiful sand, so it should be great infiltration.
Do I not see a whole stormwater system because it's not enough disturbed acreage?
I mean, there's not a stormwater system because it doesn't meet any sort of threshold. I can definitely add sort of noting about creating little pockets. I know one of the engineering comments was there's no contours on it, but that's because this area is literally flat. We didn't. I think there's maybe 6 inches over the entire site, and so there is one contour, but it's kind of on the neighboring property. You can kind of see it tail off there. So I think there's opportunity to create maybe a 6-inch to a foot sort of area, and then nicely sort of.
Are you sloping up to the new building grade? Do you create a little mound for the building to sit on?
I think it would sit maybe 6 inches higher than the surrounding area, so it will drain sort of out. And I think that could be an area that we could just sort of create a small indentation with 5-on-1 contours. You'd barely be able to know was a holding area, but would technically collect water.
I want to go back to the accessibility issue. As a multi-family, does at least 5%, but no less than one, have to be actually accessible, or do you guys know what the?
I think one unit, it doesn't have to be, but it has to be, it could be made to be accessible.
So adaptable. Or
Adaptable,
something.
that's the
Yeah.
word, yes. And we can have one unit, what is called a lift chair.
Yep. Or a small, short lift or something, whatever
It's a stair lift, it's a
Yeah.
stairwell along this, yeah.
Mhm.
That's all we have to show. In case it need somebody could adopt it for that.
Yeah, there's a whole section on in the Vermont code applying to this. It's visitable. You have to be able to get in the front door, etc. In this case, because there's a garage, that you're not really in any living space yet. So, you know, whatever the rules might be, I think you guys will have to follow them. But it's not my area of expertise on small residential projects. But the question was a good one, you know, currently, without the front stair, you know, that was not accessible anyway, but the second means of entrance or egress would have to be on the, maybe, you know, wherever it is, it's not shown on the drawings yet, because you're assuming people are walking up to the first floor, the first upper level, to get in and or out. So something will be different. The site plan shows it in the middle of each unit with a nice little walkway and maybe a pad out front, you know, which is on plan it's fine. In the building elevations don't match yet, so that's just a all right. Anything else concept?
Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with understanding the door situation. So, does only one of the units have an actual door where the garage is?
All three of them will. This is another.
Okay, so they will all look like the one on the far left that has the garage and then a door, and then on the front they'll have a door,
Each
not
one-
the second floor door.
Not the second floor door. So each unit will have a door facing West Street, and each unit will have a person door that goes out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I was guessing that, but it's good to say it. Anyone else? Any more public comment? Okay, we will close the, this is a public meeting at the conceptual level. And enter a deliberation, which, we've been given staff comments. There are a lot of variances to consider. At the concept level, do we approve or deny it, and then we actually put all the conditions in at the next level, or is it appropriate to have a number of these conditions in at the concept level so we can say these are all the things that we'll expect when you come in for the final?
I think that depends what you plan to do with the final. If because the applicant was asking for a concurrent, like a conceptual and final site plan be heard today, but that's,
My personal opinion is there are too many outstanding issues, and short of the actual required 2 site plan and lighting plan, I'm not prepared to go through the exercise of a final. If my board members overrule me, we'll do it, but that's my current position.
I feel the same.
I agree.
All right, so we're not doing a final tonight. So I'm happy to provide as much input to the applicants as we can, in which case we should go through the variance requests and decide whether we might be able to consider them in the final, as this will give them direction to proceed to a final. So let's start. I'm on page 8 of 10. I am looking at conceptual site plan recommendations, and I think it's a pretty good list of the necessary waivers. So we're going to go through and we're going to see if we would be able to consider these waivers or not. If we are, then that sends a message to the applicant. If we're not, that sends a different message to the applicant about what changes would have to be made to the application for it to be successful at the final level. So, Development Review Board shall consider whether to grant a waiver for the front setback requirement which really in this case applies, if we, can we get those elevations back up again? Sorry, Mike.
No problem.
I think it was well presented. If you look at the, well, we kind of need the elevations.
You want the elevations instead?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what you can tell from here, just in case you want to know what I'm thinking, is that the building itself is fine. The mass of the building is right where it's supposed to be on the setback, and so now you're talking about whatever is happening off the ground level, whether it's a stoop or a set of stairs or even the little projections for the gable features. Would be the only things projecting into the setback, and I'm totally fine with those. I think that the goal of this is to keep the bulk of the building from pushing too far forward, and it's kind of customary to have, the entry porch or something out there that would be in the setback. So the notion that there's actually, especially on a neighborhood like this where it's not, a downtown city block where you really, every foot matters because it's sidewalk and it's street and all that. You're already 15 feet away from the street, and you're talking about minor variations in the facade of the building as it addresses the street. So I don't have a problem with that. If anybody else has a problem with that, now's your chance.
I guess maybe it says somewhere, how far back are the sort of the bottom of the stairs from the sidewalk?
Well, the stairs are going away, so we're not doing the stairs. They said they were going to take those off. If you're looking at their site plan, there appears to be something out there which might be a patio or an entry terrace or something at grade level, I'm guessing. And if there's a little half wall or is there a roof form suggested over that?
So again, this is
Something.
engineer's point of view. It has not been designed by an architect, but what I was showing was kind of a 4-foot wide stoop, and then there would be an overhang above that stoop that would be a half foot larger, so 4.5 feet. So there's 10.5 feet shown.
So you got a little step up entry pad, probably gets you up to 6 inches.
Yeah.
That we were talking about before, up to the finished floor, and then you might have a couple of columns there and a little roof element.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. Okay. So, and what you guys are probably familiar with seeing is the, there's a million variations of what kind of columns might be there. It depends on what the, you've seen everything from little tracery metal ones to columns, old classical columns. So could be anything, we don't know yet. I'm not sure we can say much about it given we don't have design purview, but it wants to match other things in the neighborhood. And from my drive down the street, that gives you a lot of leeway.
And we'll see that in the final site plan.
You'll
We'll
see it on the
updated.
site plan. If they choose to show us what it actually looks like, that's a bonus.
Don't we require that?
Well, the only reason why I asked for the elevations is actually because of the requirement that the conversions to duplex, triplexes, and fourplexes be done in the style of a traditional frontage house. And you can't tell the style of a building without
You
anything
can't
like
see
that.
that.
So
Yeah.
that's we're not looking at colors or anything like that, but there is an element of design within the traditional style of a frontage style house, or whatever it is.
So in the final plan, we'll see the front door and we'll see what it looks like that we don't see now, rather than the stairs.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a
Yeah.
rush job to
Yeah.
get Chris that
Yeah.
information, and me and Dan will collaborate and to have it.
I think it's
It
actually
will make it look a lot nicer than my plan.
pretty interesting because if you drive up and down the street, you'll notice that most of the structures are showing you a garage door in the front, and you guys put them around back, which is, in a way, it's
Nice.
really nice, right? So, again, you've got a lot of leeway. All you gotta do is walk up and down the street, and you see the range of stylistic baseline. So, So it looks like the first one, we appear to feel like you'll be able to meet that. The second one goes away, the design standards related to the height, because we just determined that.
No, this is a different rule. Yeah. So R2, residential 2, the district where this is located, has a special design standard. Chris mentioned the first provision, which is the conversion of duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes shall be done with a traditional detached frontage style home, which we just had a good discussion on. The second provision is one on parking, a rule that we'd like the board's feedback on. Parking shall not take up more than 30% or 20 feet of the linear frontage of the lot, whichever is less.
Page 4 of the staff report.
Page 4 of the staff report. And I think staff would agree that locating parking in the rear of this building, as the applicants have proposed, is good design in this instance. As written, it's an interesting wording, this 30% or 20 feet, because it does take up that distance, but it's completely screened from view by being in a garage. So, looking for some clarity on your thoughts on that.
I think we said it already. Our thoughts are that putting the parking in the back is a nice thing, and I'm going to say that therefore it doesn't impact this. I'll also, again, reference something in my own neighborhood, which is new development that went in. I would say almost every home in my development has a 20, maybe a 16 to 18 foot wide double overhead garage door or two singles showing to the street and a 20 foot wide driveway. So we're already way ahead of that, and this is considered to be a more flexible neighborhood. So for me, I think the parking issue is satisfied. Putting it around back is trumps almost everything. Anyone else?
I'd agree.
All right, good. So then on the height, we found you're in compliance, so that's not an issue. 12-foot curb cut, we discussed that length. I think you guys have direction on that. We're encouraging you to make it wider, to allow at least one car to sit there while another one enters. So you've got that. We should consider a variance granting relief from driveways to be greater than 2 feet from the side lot line. I think that's going to come down to we want to see 2 feet there, and enough sense that the property line edge can be respected and not get damaged or snow tossed over the side or any of that kind of thing. So part of that is a ongoing maintenance question, and part of that is just possibly a physical barrier to make sure that we're going to be able to comply with that. But the 2 feet, I was really nervous about that. I'm glad to hear the rest of the discussion here, because I think 6 inches is I'm pretty uncomfortable with 6 inches. So the 2 feet, if it's in the rules, that's 2 feet.
Just so I get is a fence a desire? Is having a fence in that a desire of this board? I don't think it make or break thing for us when we just put it in.
Yeah, I'm not married to the fence. What I'm married to is some way to be sure that the neighbor's not constantly calling all of us up saying, you know, this is unacceptable and the most miserable thing. How could you do this to me? Right? So you figure out a way, and if the fence makes it all go away, then the fence is a great idea. If the fence isn't there, you're going to have some more questions on how to make sure that your snow and your stuff doesn't end up on the neighbor's property. Because it's tight. Even
I
2
like
feet
fences.
is tight.
I think fences make good neighbors. I mean,
Okay.
The fence would not take away my desire to see the 2 feet still. Just to be
oh yeah,
Clear
no,
on that.
No, I think
including
we're
the 2
clear.
feet and the fence. I think is
I think it's a yes and for
Yep.
the fence, yeah.
All right. consider granting relief from the 15-foot buffer for multifamily dwellings located adjacent to a single-family dwelling. I want to say we can work with that, given the low impact nature of the actual size of this proposed multifamily. This is the smallest multifamily dwelling possible. You can't get smaller, and I think that rule was intended to prevent much larger, the size of the ones further down towards Susie Wilson Road and so forth. That type of development from overshadowing a single family home. So I would be happy to allow some flexibility with that, which I think is available to us in offering other considerations besides space and shrubbery. I think like the fence and shrubbery or something like that would, again, I'm not married to a fence, but if fences make good neighbors, and we're trying to make sure that the neighbor is protected and their property is not at risk to whatever, then that would be a recommendation. But we're not married to it yet. You need to think about that and come back in your application. Anyone else on that side? And I wouldn't be worried about just where the building is. I think I would look for a treatment all the way down that property line. It's like stuff that happened, like, okay, now all the cars coming in are swinging around and where are the headlights going, right? And so as they swing into the garage, or come back out, after they might be backing out, so maybe the other way. But the fence can give you a lot of control over what actually bleeds over to the neighbor's property.
Fences make good neighbors. I love fences.
Anybody else on that one? So fencing, landscaping.
Yeah.
It's not a deal breaker some other way.
I think when you have like neighbors already coming in and voicing concerns, and then you have a spot where you're looking for a variance, it is going to be a harder sell for me, just taking all that in consideration. But
I was initially thinking that any single one of these wouldn't be a deal breaker, but all 7 of them would make me really wonder how we fit this in here. But I feel a little better after talking our way through some of these, having some of them possibly go away. I don't want to be in the habit of granting variances to make projects work, no matter how noble the goal is of providing affordable or more affordable housing. Right? It's a noble goal. We're desperate for that, but that can't mean that we cut all the corners and change the way we deal with this unless it's somehow allowed in our regulations. So back and forth of the planning board, that would be planning commission, that would be I think as the state pushes us towards granting more or allowing more development, housing development, especially in infill and more units and denser and all that, we need to adapt our regulations to make more accommodations for that, where it might tread on some of the corners of our regulations, right? Like you have to have a 15-foot buffer. Well, let's talk about that out. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe the 15-foot buffer can be something different, or.
Absolutely, and as the applicant said in their preamble, this was a great test case for us to measure the changes we made to accommodate the 2023 Homes Act at the state level with so many corners of our code to understand.
Yeah.
Is it enough for the state to say you can build 4 anywhere you can build 1? As it turns out, it segments so many corners of the code to consider, and Chris will go over some of the proposed changes to the LDC that may help with this.
I'm looking forward to that. All right, and then the applicants request to reconstruct the sidewalk using asphalt rather than concrete. I think we said we're okay with that. You know, absent a strict order from DPW or the city staff, I'm fine, especially knowing that they just replaced it themselves in asphalt last year. Okay. Did I miss any? Are there?
I could use clarification on what should be required of the lighting plan. A full lighting plan is supposed to mean the lighting plan with all the numbers, with a grid of numbers. Yet
But the lighting, it's funny because the lighting suppliers will do that for you.
right.
You don't have to. You go to some of the
I don't
guys
think
and
we're-
they'll fix you up with that. And
I don't think we were opposed
yeah,
to doing it. I think it was more of an overarching question of how that plan then regulates how those people operate their
you need to tie that into the HOA, I think. And so on that, if the goal is to have, most residential houses have lights mounted to the building, which are by some, people, my neighbors, the house just sold, and first thing the new neighbors did, and the old neighbors put these lights in specifically to make their house look better. The new neighbors came in, and within 2 weeks, replaced all the lights. Yeah, they're brand new. They took them all down, put up different ones. But so it happens, and the question is, does anybody keep track of what lights those new ones are? Like, I don't care if they're 20 years old and they, fail and you have to replace them, or, somebody wants the motion sensors or the automatic timers or whatever it might be. It's very hard to keep your hands on those lights and make sure they remain compliant.
And that was my question to the staff, and maybe that's another question to the staff board or the planning commission whenever you meet with them. It's just like, obviously, we are creating this building and we will be building this building, and we can just put the lights on it that we specify in the plans. That is very easy to do. As you said, the lighting companies will do the plan for us.
And, sometimes you might have a pole-mounted light out by the sidewalk or the signal. Each one of these front stoops, if you've got a light up in the soffit, you can turn on, and then maybe you probably don't need, freestanding lights of any kind, but some people put them up because they look decorative or something. You got a lighting plan. We just want to see it. We want to see what kind of stuff has to be controlled. Or that brings up another question for the back, because you got more pavement or more surface area that people are driving on out there. I think you can still probably reach the lighting levels you need from the building, but I don't know that it's anyone's intention to make you put lights on a pole back there, but
I don't think we want to. I think they'll all be building mounted.
they just get in the way and somebody has to plow by them.
No pole lighting.
It's not that big a.
It's also a
Yeah.
pretty substantial development behind this property too, so that will also provide lighting to that back area.
I wasn't able to see that in my drive-by today. Okay, so and then the landscaping plan. It looks like you're most of the way there now. I think it's just getting a quick overview.
Yeah, landscaper to do it.
Yeah, and a little consideration on the side, what's going on down the sides. All right, proposed staff conditions, all staff comments addressed, record drawings, the detailed traffic control plan, installation of utility, that's during construction, as I understand it, right?
Yeah, we, after circulating these plans, had staff comments on temporary road closures in that.
Because West Street's not just a little neighborhood street, it's
Exactly.
actually a pretty,
So looking for more maybe detail and guidance and timing as to when closures or partial closures would take place for
Um,
residents to know.
You're thinking this is more for the water line work or sewer or something, not really?
Probably interconnection to water line and sewer.
Yeah.
only.
So hopefully it's a half a day or something, whatever,
I don't even, yeah.
couple of times.
And it's an opportunity. We can talk to DPW and maybe even do some of those at night.
And do you need, construction, entrance, protection, erosion control, all that kind of stuff?
We don't have any requirement for it, but it's all in my plan. So I think the plan after C101 is C102, which is an erosion prevention sediment control plan. So that has all that information on it.
Okay. Boundary survey, you told us you're gonna get one anyway, but I think that would be, it would be great to have a final plan presented to us that we weren't wondering where the property lines are, since you're so close to them. With the, I mean, 6 inches is gonna make a difference, so. Grading, we talked about it. If you got one contour through there, maybe just keep indicating the finished floor of the units, which you probably did, and some grade point somewhere on there, so we know that you're within a foot or less of
I can do
everything.
some half contour interval grading.
Let's see, lighting, we talked about that. Building height, no worries. Driveway and the rear setback, I think that still is, I don't know if that's, sounds like that's either a variance or you gotta show us how it's not a variance.
I just found out that was, so I think we'll just work with the new plan to stay out of it.
Yeah, well, okay. Public Works inspection, municipal water line, we get that. Water, sewer, storm drainage and utilities, we talked about that. Notification to the city of work, that's routine. Sewer allocation of fees, no problem. Sidewalk, we talked about that, that's in the variance list, so that's fine. It says 5 feet or the existing width, which we already talked about, so that's fine. And sewer and water locations, whatever the new ones are, it'll be on the plans. So we talked about, we have that. So I don't have any further concerns. I would put the snow storage stuff on there that we, like, how is it gonna be handled, and maybe that's in the HOA. Right, so one of the conditions is we should be seeing the HOA, and I think we ask for that, and then you need to provide it to the city, and they have to accept it before the zoning permit goes out. Is that what you've done in the past for HOAs? Or is that part of the application?
That's not a part of the site plan application, because like we are there, the applicant is not bound to have to, you know, sell these as condos. I mean, that sounds like that is their intention, but because there's no mechanism to ensure that that does happen, we don't have any requirements for.
Pretty sure we've had them in the past, but.
John, is a different area, is prior to issuing the CO, the documents have to be recorded.
It doesn't need to be recorded.
And usually the town attorney review them.
Yeah.
This is how it's been in the past.
I remember we've seen them or discussed them, and
Yeah.
somebody had to submit them, so that sounds fine. I think that's our only way to control some of the conditional or permitted elements, then somehow that should get covered, because normally it goes with the deed, but if it's condominiumized, then it has to go. All right, anything else on that we might have missed for conditions? I'll entertain a motion to approve the conceptual plan as with all the proposed conditions and with the comments on the variance requests as discussed.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have to formally say what we're doing on the final? We're gonna, do we have to table it because it's been warned, or continue it, or do we?
It's been warned, so you have to open it and then continue it.
Okay. All right, so we're on our next to last item. We will open a public hearing as scheduled in the agenda for a final site plan review for the construction of a triplex with parking variance of a number of setback and other issues at 162 West Street in the R2 district by Franklin South LLC owner. I'll open the public hearing. Absent any additional comment, we will continue the
And
public hearing.
There's a question as to when the applicant would like to
Next meeting
next one available.
December
was it December 17 or 19?
19th, Thursday.
Yikes. You're hoping to have a quorum.
I won't be there.
Yeah. All right, we'll have to, I'll be present, possibly not in person. All right, so we'll continue this to our next meeting, currently scheduled for December 19th, 2024. Can I have a motion? Do I need a motion? Or just close?
You should probably have a motion.
Motion to close public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Seconded?
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That takes care of the that item, and we're up to item 8, other development review board items.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, it seems like there's a presentation.
Yes.
Do you know ballpark how long this is?
It
And can I
Can
leave a
be-
meeting in the middle of it if I have to go relieve a
Yes.
babysitter?
yes, and I mean that's fine with
I can
me,
leave
as
and
long
call
as-
in on Zoom. I just don't know what
Yeah. This will be probably 20 to 25 minutes if I go fast, but it depends if you what you have to say about it. But I promise it's interesting.
No, I want to hear it. I'm thinking it might make sense for me to leave and call in on Zoom so I don't shorten the timeline, but I don't know how that works in terms of.
How long does it take you to get home?
I live on Pleasant Street.
5 minutes.
I guess I have a question for the board because I have a very early flight tomorrow. And so wondering if the board is amenable to postponing this presentation to our next meeting. I don't know how busy the agenda is, but
The next meeting's agenda is not right now expected to be super busy, but if you do have any feedback now, there may still be an opportunity to feed into the policy development, whereas I mean, it's not, the door is not completely closed even after, but it's more flexible.
We essentially we have amendments to the code that are going to council for public hearing. Thus, the time is nigh for feedback. Sure.
Are you okay if I ask Chris to speed through? Do it? I mean, I'll
Yeah.
stay for it.
You have to be
That's-
back by 9 or something? Or
That's, yeah.
is that okay?
There's, yeah, I can,
And can this presentation be looked at online or separately or emailed?
Should
or,
be in your packet already.
so we have it.
You have it, yeah.
So if anybody has to leave, I think we've concluded the
And it's recorded.
sort of
This is
public
recorded.
business. I appreciate the early flights. Some of them are stupid early,
Yeah.
It's 5 a.m.
which means you're
Yes.
there by 3. Or,
So we
Stop
could,
sporting
we
at
could give you
4:45.
feedback like
Yeah.
tomorrow after this too. Okay.
but I'd like to keep going. I think to the extent that we can provide input in a timely manner to the planning commission, I'd like to do that. And I'll just remind anybody that needs to leave that they do have it, and they can also provide comment on their own. So that's my take.
Okay, so if I may begin here. Yeah, so the Planning Commission has been working on a number of land development code amendments, and I'll remind the board that there are two concurrent planning efforts going on right now. There's a transit-oriented development master plan. This is scoped for the Pearl Street corridor and the city center, and also Park Street. And this is the results of this will feed into a comprehensive plan update and additional land development code amendments after that. Now, I have this written for, it says 2026 and 2027. That is to align with when we expect the comprehensive plan update efforts to happen. There may be LDC amendments or other kind of lower, other more immediate steps that can be taken that's come out of the Connect the Junction Transit-Oriented Development Master Plan. What I'm talking about today is the 2024 LDC amendments. I mean, in all reality, this is going to be 2025 before they're adopted, if they're adopted. But these are focused on technical adjustments and what could be argued as minor fixes. Okay, so what topics are included? First of all, it's a rewrite of the sign regulations, the adjustments of residential density limits in some areas to meet Home Act requirements, and also to reduce barriers to small-scale housing construction. Adjustments of site dimensional and design standards, and this is focused on small-scale development. We're talking about 4 plexes and under. Changes to stormwater regulations, food trucks, and some technical inconsistencies.
I'm gonna follow along on.
Yep.
On the TV.
So I'll talk about each of these categories in order. Sign regulations, there was a change, there was a need to change what's in the LDC because it is not content neutral. There was a Supreme Court decision that said you can regulate based on time, place, or manner, but it can't be on content. So the Planning Commission took the City of Burlington's sign regulations and adapted them because they, after reviewing a bunch of examples, that was actually what they thought pretty well done, and there was no need to reinvent the wheel. It's supposed to be a lot more readable. There can be images in there, organized like the page on the right. Notable changes about signs. It's, as I said, based on time, place, and manner only. So it doesn't regulate election signs. It regulates signs within election periods. During election periods, you can put up any signs. So things like that. One topic that has come up many times because it's so hard to regulate and actually enforce, but there's some desire for it, is sandwich boards. Under what's proposed, there's will be allowed some restrictions. There's some changes to the wall sign size limits.
So we have some places where we can't have sandwich board signs, and that's just physically the location they want to put them isn't where they're allowed. They're supposed to be back by the businesses, but the businesses are so far back from the street that they've been putting them. They want them out by the sidewalk.
There's basically, so there's a requirement right now that it is that the sign be within 15 feet of the front entrance of that business, but it also, there's a requirement that it be taken away when the business is closed. That, I think, is actually the harder thing to do. the 15-foot requirement is being proposed to be changed to within 15 feet of either the front door or a pedestrian entrance to get to the front door. So implications on enforcement, I mean, I'm not going to dwell on this. I can't promise that what comes out of this will be you'll have all the enforcement resources placed in. I mean, I think there are priorities, and signs are, it's important, but it is not necessarily the highest priority.
While we're on the subject, especially after hours, the Big Lots signs along Pearl
Not
Street.
supposed to be there. We have
So-
been
Staff
talking
have
to
had
them.
conversations.
Every
about
once in a while, somebody decides they're gonna put them all in the back of their pickup truck and take them away. But that's rare.
The city does do that, actually. If it's in the right of way, occasionally,
In the green belt.
well, yes, in the green belt, so the city will take them away and put them in public works and ask the owners to pick them up.
And that's one of that's the location I was thinking gets the highest level of, let's say, abuse of the requirements, because you can't, if they put them back by any of the businesses and they put them back by the actual storefront, nobody even knows they're there, so they're useless.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so the owner of that building should build a new building.
Well, there's ideally it would be up closer to the street front and parking would be in the back and all that kind of thing, but for now it's not, so.
Yeah, I think the solution for that has to do with the permanent signage, and what can be put on those, and we're just like making sure that space is allocated so that all the businesses have access to it.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
so signs. Let's move on from that. Residential density limits. There's changes to meet Home Act requirements. There was one zone where we accidentally forgot to raise it, the allowed density to 4 units per lot. So this, but there are also some nuances to this. There are changes to proposed changes to allow for more smooth density transition between the city center R1 and R2 zones. So basically, 4 units allowed in anywhere a single family house is currently allowed. And we have the city kind of organized like this. We got high density, more kind of central zones, and we've got the city center highlighted in the center there with the black outline. And then we've got these kind of medium, what was intended as medium density zones, the RO district and the MF3 districts. And then we have the lower density zones, R1, R2, and the PA district. So in the RO and MF3 districts, there are currently kind of incremental lot size, minimum lot size requirements. So it's something along the lines of this one for one of those zones. It says minimum lot size shall be 7,500 square feet for the first dwelling unit, plus 3,000 for each additional dwelling unit. So for like a 10,000 square foot lot, you'd only be allowed 2 residential units. The proposed changes would remove this requirement. In fact, the Planning Commission voted in the end to, they actually wanted to raise the allowed number of units from 4 to 6 in these 2 kind of the RO and MF3 zones. And that is so that, and that's because the base has kind of been, the floor has kind of been raised, whereas in the R1 and R2 districts, you're allowed 4 units per lot. There's no incremental lot size requirement. You just need to meet the minimum lot size, and then there's still setbacks and lot coverage and height limits that practically limit what you can build. But that is what has come out of this. So the incremental lot size requirement, I'm just going to show the rationale behind why that kind of made sense to be reconsidered. many properties already exceed this limit. So take a look at 4 East Street over here. Pretty close to the city center, but it is in this kind of transition zone. Lot size 6,530 square feet. That is, well, first of all, that's actually under the minimum lot size requirement now, but it already has 2 units, and current regs would only allow 1. Just nearby, 6 Grove Street, lot size 9,150. There's 2 units as well. Also would only be allowed 1. I think there was the previous highlight was, yeah, actually, no, that's corrected. So, yeah, this other example, 11,300 square feet. It actually has 8 units. It's grandfathered. Current regs would only allow 1. So, if there are already examples that fit into the urban context, and people are used to, historically it's been there. I mean, it's there's that's reason to consider allowing the replication and evolution upon the natural pattern that already exists. So,
is there a consideration of allowing more density than? I mean, if they're already 8 in some cases, but we're saying the new regs allow 1 or 2.
Well,
or
that's
4,
a little. Well,
yeah.
it would actually they settled on 6
So
in the
they're
end.
going
So,
to 6.
yeah, it's 4 by statute now, and their planning commission wanted to get it up to 6 in these 2 transition zones.
Are there new projects required to have the 1 parking space per unit?
1 parking
Whereas
space per
the
unit.
8 grandfathered ones, I bet, don't have 8 parking spaces.
I don't know. That one's a rare. It's a
That's-
rather rare
That's
example.
a pretty
It is a
pretty
lot.
interesting.
But is it like because those are like houses that have been chopped up into apartments. So those are different than what, if you are gonna build something, it's gonna be more like what we just looked at
Probably,
now.
if you look closely at this 8 unit example, though, there is actually a little parking lot at the back.
Oh, in the corner.
Yeah.
So I'd say the front looks like a house. The back maybe doesn't look so, like,
Yeah.
or at least the side yard doesn't look so much like a. I mean, it's another front. I mean, the Central Street side does not look so much like a. Doesn't look in the style of a traditional frontage style house, is what it's saying.
Fascinating. Okay.
So I mean, this was maybe an edge case. I think the compromise was that 6 seemed reasonable if you can fit within the lot coverage limits.
Right. So the real kicker is trying to meet all the other requirements. So yes, you could have more density, but we're not going to relax the other requirements like setbacks and lot coverage and parking and.
Right. For the most part, this LDC amendment effort has been in. I mean, it started out as technical fixes only, and kind of I added some low-hanging fruits of what clearly is working against the ability to build missing middle housing. But the other intent is that if there's anything more substantial that requires more significant public feedback, that it should come out of the transit-oriented development study or come out of the comprehensive plan, which we'll be working on.
Yeah, because I would think that any of the dwelling opportunities that are, as you get closer to the transit lines or the bus routes or the train, your chances of needing a car drop, right? So or needing as many cars per. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And you can always ask. I mean, a developer can ask for a waiver for parking, and that is to go below 1 space per unit, but it's just the default rate. That was
Yeah.
could be 1.
Okay.
So, what other adjustments? So, adjustments to dimensional and design standards for small-scale developments. I brought this up to the Planning Commission because of 2 really great efforts I've been following at the state level. The first is the enabling better places. The zoning guide that they created in 2020. This is a guide for municipalities to support local bylaw updates that make kind of middle housing more possible. And the other thing that Vermont has been working on very recently is the Homes for All toolkit, and this is supposed to this provides prototype unit designs for 2, 3, and 4 unit homes, and they're all the examples are based on kind of the Vermont, what you can already see in Vermont, the styles of housing you can already see. And the intent of this was to allow municipalities to test fit these against their regulations, and to also encourage kind of the mass construction of just repeat, the repeat of what works. So we wanted to make sure that at least some of these examples would be possible within the context of a typical Essex Junction lot with whatever zoning regulations are in place. So, for example, these are some of the housing types that they have shown, and the prototype unit designs includes floor plans that developers can hopefully take one day and make reality. So what came out of this? There was a reduction, proposed reduction of the minimum front yard setback to 15 feet in the MF1, MF3, RO, and MCU mixed commercial use districts. There's a clarification of some design requirements. That's actually related to what we were talking about today. And an allowance for up to 2 principal residential structures per lot. And that's, and we'll get to that. That's that could be a consequential change. But about the setbacks, the Enabling Better Places report guide recommends that the front setbacks in a neighborhood, what they call a neighborhood zone, that is something pretty close to the city center but is supposed to be walkable, be somewhere between 8 and 12 feet. And the side be 5, rear be 3 if you have rear lanes, or 12 if you don't. This is, in reality, these are some of what Essex Junction's setbacks are like. For the most part, they're bigger than what Enabling Better Places suggests. But what I've really zeroed in on has been the front setback requirements for some of these zones, what I call these transition zones. Those are the MF1, MF2, MF3, RO, those ones in between that are not city center, and they're not the R1 and R2 districts. So, for example, in the RO district, this is along Park Street. Requirement is 20 feet front setback. You can see a bunch of buildings are currently in the front setback. And this is what it looks like. It doesn't necessarily look out of place if you replicated this structure in more places. A more extreme example, you look on East Street, MF3 district, front setback requirements, 30 feet. You can see half of some of these houses are cut off and situated in the front setback. And from the front, it looks like this. I mean, it's kind of what people expect to see. And perhaps it is what people expect to be replicatable. So proposed amendments would just standardize the front yard setback requirements of 15 feet along these zones. And I'll say that I think one reason why this really matters is because when you have more of a front setback, you're essentially encouraging parking to be put in front of the building. If you allow the building to be put all the way up to the front, you can ask people to put in a driveway to the side or the rear without blowing through the lot coverage limits.
So when the setback, is it from the middle of the street to
Nope.
from the
The lot line.
the lot line to in. And
Yep.
then isn't there another requirement from the center of the street to your property line? No.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
There's requirements for the public street width, depending.
Yeah.
But that's concerning the street, nothing. to
Oh,
do
that's
with
if you
the
make a
building
subdivision. If you make a subdivision, it has to be a certain width, and that's counted from the middle.
Middle of the.
Well, I mean, there's there's like some relationship between the middle of the streets and the development pattern if you're dealing with a subdivision plan.
Okay.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, and it really goes back to Hannah's garage. That driving here, I was like, hey, my garage is 3 feet from my property line. If somebody were to build to the LDC, it would not be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, because nothing in the neighborhood is built to the LDC.
Right. And yeah, I think the planning commission, I mean, they have, there may still be some wiggle room to make some adjustments. In fact, there are some adjustments that I'm going to ask them to consider. I think some of these like side setbacks was not within the scope of this, only because of the spirit of this was to focus on like the low hanging fruit, but also to like anything that is more consequential, bigger changes were to be left to the full planning process. But if there are any, there certainly may be more opportunities to make tweaks to what matters the most. Okay, so special design standards. Currently in the LDC it says parking shall not take up more than 30% or 20 feet of linear frontage from of the lots, whichever is less. I think the intent of that was to prevent what I'm drawing on the right over there. But in practice, that's it doesn't specify it. It's not specific enough to really tell what that means. Does it matter if it's screened? If you put a tree in front of it, does that still count? So this is what is being proposed. The proposal is to consider 3 distinct areas. Area A, that's the curb cut and driveway, 20 foot max as is currently written, basically, but with some exceptions. 20 foot max, but we're talking about triplexes and fourplexes now. So extending what's currently applying to single family and duplex homes to fourplexes. Area B, no more than 30% of that should be parking, period. And then area C is no more than 30% being parking unless it is screened from view. And screening can be with bushes or with fencing or just be behind the home. So probably the intent is to end up with something like this, or if we're lucky, something like this. We'll talk. I've got a little more to say about this 20-foot driveway width max limit. There was a tweak to that based on this test case, and this test case is actually somebody who went to the planning commission. I mean, they wanted to build something. They wanted to build a fourplex. There's a duplex right now. They wanted to convert the garage into another unit and build actually one more unit above that. So all the parking would have to be outside. We told them they can't do it based on several reasons, and parking is one of them. But we said there is policy work being done right now, and this actually, maybe something can be done. So here's what the property looks like from an aerial view. So I would like, this is actually a double frontage lot, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, we'll think about it as just a single frontage on West Street, because I mean it's an irregular lot as well. So there's a, and what's facing West Street Extension is a patch of trees basically that is city owned. So thinking about what West Street as the front of this. They would need to figure out a way to put 4 parking spaces there. So if you maxed it out at 20 feet for the curb cut, you would end up with a layout kind of like this, but you wouldn't really be able to reach the parking spaces at the edges without rolling over the grass. So there was a compromise here to say that in a situation where you have you have enough frontage that you can still stay within 30%. And if you are providing a triplex or fourplex, you'd be able to go up to 27 feet, which is the width of 3 parking spaces. And then with a little bit of kind of widening, tapering, you could probably reach the 4 spaces there. And that's assuming the 4 spaces can be within 30% of the lot's frontage.
Now, if you told them to take the whole parking arrangement and put it up on the left-hand side, move everything up
We
there.
encourage the
We
applicant to
did,
do so.
Did that?
right, that was the first thing we thought of, but there are costs to that. There's a utility pole there. You would have to put in a whole new driveway. Yeah, you probably could. I mean, it's just every additional cost.
Yeah, if you're
reduces
starting
the
from
chance that-
scratch and that's a tear down and a start over like
Right.
we had today, you could have them do stuff like that. I mean, you'd be able to reconfigure the arrangement of the things on the lot to comply with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's not written right now to be different for a clean, like a fresh start, like a new build versus a retrofit. And the thought was that if you want to make it possible for the retrofits, the 27-foot would be helpful.
But you could distinguish between new build with an exception for a retrofit if you wrote it that way.
That is possible. That is something that can be suggested to the city council when it gets to them.
Yeah, like the life safety code for buildings has tons of sections on what to do if it's an existing condition. And they're usually exceptions. Okay, here's the rule, and then if it's an existing condition, you get some special allowances.
That's an interesting point. I will make sure that gets brought up at some point.
And that'll have big cost considerations too. That if somebody's tearing down, we can require them to build it appropriately, to build it ideally, and it's not really going to cost anymore. As opposed to this specific case, if it's an existing homeowner who just wants to have a mother-in-law suite in the back, if we make that cost prohibitive, then they will simply not do it. Or else they'll do it and then rent it out for a ton of money, such that we get far wealthier people moving into the neighborhood than are currently here.
And there's a phrase in sort of green building that says the greenest building out there is the one that's already existing. So you don't actually want to encourage people to knock stuff down and rebuild it all unless it's really bad. You want to try and preserve or conserve or adapt or reuse as much as you can. And I think in most cases it ends up being more affordable. So you would encourage that additional housing that we are hoping for.
Right. So last point within design here is that allowing up to 2 principal structures per lot. And this came from a real life situation as well, where somebody came to the planning department and asked if they could do something, and we said no. So right now this is allowed. You can have a single family home, you can have an accessory apartment that is separate. If it is, there's a whole owner occupancy requirement for at least one of those units. But you're also allowed, after the Home Act, to have a fourplex in one building. No owner occupancy requirements for that. We had a situation where there was somebody with a duplex and they had an existing garage. This existing garage actually had a space above. There was kind of a loft that they wanted to turn into a second floor apartment. Within the existing structure, it's been there forever. And we said there's no way you could do that under the existing rules. But this would be allowed if you connected it with another building, if you made it one structure. I mean, however you could do that, then it would be 4 units within one structure. So the thought was that it doesn't really make sense to have that distinction. Like 4 units is 4 units. If you want to split it over 2 principal structures, and if it fits within setbacks, height limits, lot coverage limits, so be it. That could open up some more opportunities to build. Tiny homes could also, be something that could fit into this category as well. Although that sometimes can be an ADU. But you can have it. Let's say you already have a triplex, you can also add a tiny home on the back, something like that.
Are these graphics likely to be included in the updated LDC or something that provide guidance for everybody on this?
Well, these ones, some of them were. The parking ones were. That graphic was proposed to be added in there. This principal structure thing, I didn't think it was.
I'm just.
Quite
I
necessary.
mean, some of these are pretty helpful.
Yeah, I think they're really
to
helpful.
just visually, like we've been asked to do some of this kind of thing in the past, and the definition of what a connection to make it one structure means is pretty loose.
Right.
And so the result is that there's a lot of flexibility to allowing certain things to happen if they're done well and they appear to meet the intent of the ruling, no matter what. That definition can stretch a little.
Yeah.
Like you can put a breezeway or a trellis or something there. It doesn't actually have to be. I mean, everybody knows the prototype of the garage and the breezeway and the house, and then over time those usually get enclosed, and then that's your mudroom or your laundry room or something, and that's pretty normal. And so if you imagine the same kind of progression happening with the multi-structures on a single property, there's a lot of flexibility there. So I think it would be helpful, again, for the DRB to get as much guidance on the intent from the planning commission as possible.
All right, I'll keep that in mind. I do think in this case, moving in the direction of allowing 2 principal structures would actually make this kind of layouts less necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're ready to move on, there's just a few other things here. Changes to stormwater regulations. There's going to be a separate stormwater ordinance in preparation for that. Some of these regulations are being moved out of the LDC. Don't really have to say much more about that. It's pretty technical. Food trucks on private property. So currently, they are allowed in zones where restaurants are allowed, but they are permitted as temporary uses in temporary structures on private property.
And you're talking about active ones, not I own it, so I parked it in my driveway. You're talking about people actually
Selling,
operating
that's right.
from them.
Yeah, using it as a place to sell food. So right now, because they are permitted as temporary uses, they cannot be in the same place for more than 6 months a year. But the city has not been strict on enforcing this since COVID. But I think now that there's a good time to formalize what should be allowed, and the proposal would allow for year-round operation of food trucks on private property, and this would just be a permanent use. They would get a zoning permit, and that is a use. And they would not be allowed to use gasoline or diesel generators for more than if they are to be permanently permitted.
So anyone can have a food truck on their property if they wanted to?
No, only if you're in
Only-
a zone that
okay.
already allowed
Oh, okay.
eating and
gonna
drinking
say.
establishments.
There is there's some kind of energy rule that says you're not supposed to idle your car for, you know, at all or more than a minute or something, but that gets completely abused, often.
Yeah.
I don't know who or how that is supposed to be enforced, but commonly it's somebody who's at work and they have a break, so they go out to their car because they're tired of sitting in the break room, or maybe there's no break room and they turn their car on, either to stay hot or to stay cold.
They don't, yeah.
It stays near the complex web of sound ordinance enforcement, which has a lot of different angles to it. But that the intent is to write in something that at least encourages food truck applicants to not run one constantly for their operation.
Right. Actually, the change would say that if you are getting even if you're getting a temporary use permit for a food truck, if you need to use a gasoline or diesel generator, you can only get the permit period can only be 2 months or shorter.
So does that encourage electric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hookups or you know, you could still have gas stoves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a bunch of other corrections or of technical inconsistencies. There is a change to proposed change to deal with what uses that are not specifically designed in the or actually not uses that are not specifically defined in the use chart. So basically, if it's not on there, it's going to say that it should be treated as a conditional use. If it is on there and it says and is not allowed anywhere, then that's a prohibited use. So there's a proposal to allow for administrative review of triplexes and fourplexes. This, you know, the timing of this is interesting because of, you know, the application that has just come through. But there was a recognition that the site plan requirements for these kind of missing middle housing types are quite onerous. If you have to do a full, let's say if you do a full traffic impact study, you have to do a landscape architect plan.
All of that.
It's difficult.
Well, even what we're asking out of the triplexes is pretty, you know.
Right. Duplexes would have had none of those requirements, and all of a sudden they kick in at triplex. So like this would just extend it to fourplexes. I think I might have mentioned this in a little bit, but there is a compromise that was proposed about landscaping, because right now single-family homes and duplexes don't have any landscaping requirements, and then once you get to the site plan level, you have to do the 3% of your building costs and landscape architect stamp all those requirements. Yeah. The proposal is to just require shade trees. There is a provision in the LDC saying that there should be a shade tree every certain number of feet of street frontage. If those can be provided, or if an alternate placement can, if it's not possible that those trees can be placed in an alternate location, that's probably all that would be asked.
I guess I would, I mean, we had a lot of tools in our, available to us for this triplex, because of the screening and the buffering and the landscape requirements, lighting requirements. On a project that small, it feels like it's overkill. So I kind of encourage that, but I still think that there ought to be some way to allow a little bit of common sense, or some, you know, if it looks obviously like one thing is overpowering another thing, you know, how do we be sensitive? Because that you're gonna get neighbors who come and say somebody's building a fourplex next to me and it's 6 feet off the property line, and my house is non-conforming and it's 2 feet off the property line, and these people are practically in my living room, you know, and you won't be able to do anything about it. You know, like somehow, you know, there's a protectionist or a buffering benefit that if it's applied properly, I think you get a lot of mileage out of it. So if you allow these developments without any ability to trigger something, that could be a problem. But if you overdo it, you're not encouraging, housing development either. So you guys got to figure that one out with the planning commission.
I was going to say that really does end up being the planning commission's responsibility, is to again look at applications like the one we reviewed tonight and understand what rules are snagging on these, and thinking about for developers perhaps with less experience too, what does that situation look like for them?
Right, because that applicant has a lot of experience. He's been through a lot of this before on many bigger projects, so he gets it. He may think it's unfair, and he's probably right, but that's what's set up right now. So I think for other applicants, we've had people come in that had no idea, how to comply with all this stuff, and were completely shocked at the requirements. And I think that does hamper some of the smaller developments.
So there was also a provision to enable the use of the PUD process for kind of multifamily, multi-story structures. This came up in the past with 132 Pearl Street. That project ended up past conceptual site plan review, but it didn't. They did not continue. But there was a recognition that the PUD rules, as strictly written, say that you need a certain amount of open space, private open space per unit, and it's just impossible to meet in an urban context. So especially if you're stacked. So this would offer an alternative to that, which involves private open space, a little bit of private open space in terms of in the form of balconies, for I think all of the residential units.
I think that's a great observation that some of the PUDs that we've seen have been on fairly large tracts of land, and if you think of one applying to a more dense location, it's still desirable. How do you accommodate that?
So lot coverage, there's a clarification of lot coverage to specifically exclude stormwater permeable driveways. That was, I think this was a part of the staff report, and an interpretation of what's there right now. I think what was written was intending for driveways to always, expecting driveways to always be impermeable. This change would remove limits on unrelated persons living together in the same dwelling unit. Right now, you can't have 6 roommates living together in a house and meet the requirements.
I think it's 4 in Burlington. I mean, it's a common limitation when you're worried about, just a whole bunch of students getting together and being in a house or something. But.
Right. This is actually required by the state anyway. You're not allowed to regulate based on people's relationship status anymore. There's also a zoning map correction. There was some rezoning that was done quite a few years back. So Autumn Pond had a rezoning. And a bunch of other places had some minor tweaks at the same time. That was passed by the planning commission, but somehow there was a version control issue with the zoning maps since then, and the old version came back, but it was not caught over several editions of the LDC. This is intended to just correct that to what was intended based on understanding of the minutes. Oh, and 50-foot setback for outdoor cannabis cultivations as enabled by Act 166. So the canopy, this is based on the cannabis plant canopy and the edge of your property.
Has there been any change to the state language or other requirements for around cannabis that affect our code?
That is now allowed if municipalities adopt it. There's also, I think, they were doing a study on the basically the siting of cannabis on cultivations in urban areas, and there's something will come of that study and probably be included in the next legislative session. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but at this point, this is what is possible.
All right.
Some additional items that were added in definition of a hard surface for parking. There's some inconsistency as to whether or not gravel counted as hard surface. We know that it counted as impervious surface, but we require certain parking lots of over a certain size to be hard surface. So for accessibility purposes and because that was clearly what was intended, we're saying that gravel does not count as a hard surface.
What's interesting about gravel is that it's usually considered impervious, even though your
soft,
mind is saying the water goes right through it, but over time it densifies and it doesn't really.
Right, and that's two related but separate issues.
Yeah.
In being impervious and being a hard surface. I think hard surface is also thinking about accessibility. If you're going to have an accessible spot, it really should be on a an actually hard surface. Shade tree requirements, we talked about that. That's the kind of compromise for the removal of the landscaping requirements for triplexes and fourplexes. There was something added to allow us to require a professional land survey for these triplexes and fourplexes if they're building close to the edge and if we see a need. There's also some language about footprint lots to say that those are not lots for the purposes of planning and zoning. Footprint lots which are created just under the footprint of the building, or I guess related to the footprints of the housing for the ownership and financing purposes only, are not to be regulated, are not to be subject to lot coverage and setback requirements. That doesn't make sense. The fire department had some concerns about being able to access buildings at the rear of two if you have two principal structures of the building in the back. They said that they want to make sure that there's either fire access, you can get the fire truck close enough to that to deal with any problems there, or that they should be sprinkled.
That's pretty common. It's been a big issue, but the working definition of getting close enough has been based on hose length. At least in the past. So some of those hose lengths are 250 feet, 400 feet. And so most of the, a lot of places the firemen will say, we're not going into that driveway, we're going to be on the street and we'll be using our hoses.
Yeah.
So it's probably not a bad to have something in there about it, but it really has to be driven by the fire department and what their ability to get in and out of places is.
So they are now, it mentions that for anywhere there's two principal structures per lot, or anytime there's a site plan review, that the fire departments will be the ones to review fire access.
Yeah, they should. We see that, I saw that in the town when I was guesting on their planning commission, because they have a lot more rural places with driveways that may or may not support a fire truck. And so every application would be reviewed by the fire department. Yes, we can get there. No, we can't get there. Yeah.
This is a kind of hot off the press ad that we want to bring to the planning commission to consider, and that is the 15-foot buffer requirement between single-family homes and multifamily. As is currently written, multifamily includes triplexes and fourplexes. But in other parts of the LDC, the intent seems to be that that's multifamily be 5 units and above now. Now that the single family duplex, triplex, and fourplexes each have their own use category in the use chart. So with that, if it is tweaked to say that multifamily means 5 units and above, then this 15-foot buffer requirements would kick in at that stage. I think there's more nuance to it. I think it's really like there should be thought going into what this is meant to prevent. I mean, if you were allowed to build to the same dimensional standards a single family home, if a large single family home would have been fine, but then you put some walls into there and you put some more people into there and you say that is not fine, I mean, are you, like, it sounds kind of exclusionary in terms of, like you're saying neighbors are bad. But I think I would argue that the real impact are massing and shadow impacts. So if you are building to the same height limits, then perhaps that's perhaps it doesn't make sense to have this 15-foot buffer. But then if you're right next to another zone, or if for some reason that building could exceed what the normal height limit is within your zone, then maybe there should be some consideration for that additional the additional airspace that is now, or I guess the additional sunlight that is now blocked. Should there be like some kind of, I don't know, like step back requirement or anything like that? I mean, it can be. I think at this point the simple thing to do is probably just to tweak the definition of multifamily, but I think there could be a more nuanced conversation as well if that was desired.
I kind of like your thinking in that if it's 35 feet high, it's 35 feet high, and then, whether you've got an attic up there or another living space, the bulk is no different. The place where I would say that there might be a factor is the number of people living next door to you. So if you had a single family home that just happened to be big, you might have 3, 4, 5 people in it. If you have a multifamily home structure of the same size, there might be 20 people living in it, and that there's a significant difference to 20 people living next door than 5. Just in terms of impact.
Could there be layout considerations there? Like in this specific instance tonight, I find it a bit of a stretch to think that the existing resident is going to live right next door to the people on the far end of the triplex. That he's still only going to have people, he's only going to have one set of neighbors. It's functionally going to be 3 houses right in a row.
Well, what's the actual impacts of having more neighbors that is undesirable, or could be thought of as undesirable? I think it might be helpful to parse out. Is it noise, or is it the number of cars that go by? Is it like, and then target a policy intervention towards that impact?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you never know, you can get great neighbors and you can have not great neighbors, and that it's almost not, you never know depending on building type or
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it's one family or one person or 20. It's a roll of the dice sometimes, and you got almost no control over it. But I think if you in the considerations for what appropriate or necessary buffering is, I think you kind of have to weigh some factors and say, okay, there's a reason why we would want to help, or mitigate. And the other thing is it can't, if the single family is a single family now, but it could be a fourplex. It may be currently a single family. You know what I mean? Like that the lot opportunity just changed for everybody, not just for the one lot that happens to be doing it, but the possible use of the neighboring lot is equally as dense.
Right. I think if this is meant to counter or to provide relief against the impacts of density in general, like just the number of neighbors that you're living near, I'm not sure a buffer is what will really help, because you could turn the building, you could arrange the building a little bit differently and it could be outside of the 15-foot buffer. It's the same number. It could still be, 20 people living beside you. It does seem to me like a buffer is meant more for like shadow impacts and just aesthetics. And if that is the case, perhaps there just needs to be nuances about if you are at the edge of a zone and the building beside you is of a different regulated by different rules. Like that shouldn't have to.
Well, I will
impact
say
your
is what the developers are gonna, let's say somebody buys a lot and wants to put in a fourplex or something that they're essentially making money from. Like it's a rented, they're gonna sell it as condos, whatever it is. Their incentive as developers is to build the biggest thing they can. They get the most number of units in they can. Whereas if you're a single family home, your incentive is different. It's how do I build myself something I really like and it gives me privacy and I like the way it looks and all. It's a totally different model. And so what we see is if I'm going to do a single family home, unless I'm looking for something really modern, I mean capital N modern, and I build a box that has glass walls or whatever it has, the form is different and the use is different and the expectations are different, because I want to get, if I'm building for profit, I want to get the biggest thing I can. And so the guy in the 1.5 story single family home, maybe it's 2.5 stories, all of a sudden if I can go 35 feet, I'm gonna try 3 stories. And if that looks like a straight wall up as close to the property line as I'm allowed, that's a impact that you don't get from the single family home. And I think that's one of the things we've always tried to watch out for, is how close can the face of that new structure be to the property line, and what impact does that have on the neighbor? And it might be more than shade and shadowing and massing. It's also windows and who's now lost their privacy and acoustic and visual, all that kind. There's a lot there. So I don't know how you regulate it all. I mean, we try. The buffering and the setbacks are an issue and have been used pretty effectively as you hit those mid-range projects where it's a triplex or a fourplex. You're asking to start maybe having a little more disparity between neighboring structures, and that's one thing that the LDC has tried to regulate. Like we did when things went in on Park Street and those apartments were across from the Rockies went in. They had to be phased along Park Street because there was a 1-story structure there and somebody wanted to build a 5-story structure. And, we kind of had to say, well, the pattern is a little too aggressive there. So I think some of them ended up looking like 4, but then the 1-story sold and that went up. So ultimately, the streetscape moderates itself based on demand. But in the meantime, the policy has always been to worry about the person who might be living in the 1-story and have to face the fact that somebody next to them might be able to build a 4 or 5-story.
I think this will certainly deserve some discussion at the planning commission, which Michael, you're gonna have to lead because I'm gonna be away. But yeah, it's gonna be. There's certainly a trade-off to be considered there, and it could be difficult because you're also talking about people who, like, there's somebody that has been living there before, but it's also people who currently don't have a home that you're creating a home for, or extra homes for.
It's a whole, you know, the general intent has been to continue to try and maintain a planning structure that allows more density to happen in areas that are already have structures on them, and they're going to change over time. Almost none of the structures around Five Corners and up and down the main arteries were anything but single family homes. None of them. And so those have been evolving and changing, and the approach to integrating the new ones with the old ones is difficult, you know, because center of town there's a lot of pressure on that to be more dense, and the LDC is promoting more density. So yeah, anyway, we're all still struggling with that. When the projects come to us, we've got the regulations to work with. I'm gonna go back to, now that the planning commission and the DRB are separate entities, maintaining the connection between the intent and the decision making was a concern before we split, and so we on the decision making side really need to understand the intent and the changes. So I like the presentation a lot. Thanks for bringing us up to speed, and if I'm sure we'll need more of these as the new regulations actually get codified and brought forward to us.
Yep. We definitely would love to have more opportunities to do things like this, and vice versa. We got some inspiration from our peers in Williston who do a DRB case of the month for their planning commission. So there's opportunity to send info the other way too.
I like
That's
that.
pretty good. We're supposed to have joint meetings, I think, a little more often than we might have.
We're with the planning commission, right?
Yeah, might have, and you know, with the city council, I mean, we all kind of are trying to, you know, do things that are in the interest given to us by the city council. So, yeah, I think we all kind of stopped during COVID a little bit of having lots and lots of meetings, but I still encourage the communication to keep going back and forth. So thanks for the presentation. Is it over?
That's it.
All right.
Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
Are we, anybody else have anything to add? Is there any we'll do this later, I guess. Anything else to add before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn? We do have a quorum, right? We're okay.
Oh, yeah, well then I move that we adjourn.
Yes, I second that.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank